All right, we're going to gavel this meeting to formal order, and I'll ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Councilman DeCiccio. Councilwoman Gallego.
Here.
Councilman Nowakowski.
Here.
Councilwoman Stark.
Here.
Councilman Valenzuela. Councilman Waring.
Here.
Councilwoman Williams.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pastor. Here. Mayor Stanton.
Here, we have an interpreter with us today. Ms. Holm, please introduce yourself for the audience.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Judy, soy intérprete de español. Si alguien necesita el equipo, por favor venga conmigo o con el personal de la ciudad. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Now we're on to citizen comments. People have up to 3 minutes to provide comments before this city council. Our first speaker will be Mr. Pat Vint, followed by Mr. John Rusnick, and then Mr. Brian Stanley is the third speaker.
Hello there. How is everyone here today? Oh, there's our friend Sal DeCiccio. Thank you, young man. You're on our side, huh? Anyway, I am Joseph Patrick Vint. Been here since 1952 when I landed at Luke Air Force Base from Korea. So we weren't let to do our job. We could have finished it. We could have killed millions of Chinese, but they wouldn't let us. So now we got the little fat man in North Korea. Anyway, I was going to be real bad today, but I got a wonderful call at 12:14 p.m. from the Violent Crimes Division of the Phoenix Police, from Ms. Van Zandt. She's from the Violent Crimes Department of the City of Phoenix Police. And I just didn't think I was that bad. I knew I was bad, because if you're bad, you'll live forever. If you're good, you die young. So don't ever be good. Be bad, you'll live forever. I'm going to live to be 120. I'm 87 now, so I'm on my way. Might be a little crippled, but doesn't matter. I got all these little good things here. Wheelchairs, golf carts, many little old goody scooty thing, scooty.com. Get one of those. Anyway, I want to thank Miss Van Zandt, Detective, City of Phoenix Violent Crimes Division. She called me at 12:14. I've been trying to get the last tape of their conversation at our home at 8340 North 16th Street. They refused to give it to me since February 12th. That's over a month and a half. She said today if we would go to 1717 West East Grant, and if you call them, they'll go over 20 minutes telling you where they are. There's 1717 East Grant, Suite 100, and they're east of 16th Street. Isn't that wonderful? Well, wouldn't you think if you're on 7th Street, you got to be east 16th Street? So now, John Rusnick and myself, we're going to leave here instantly after this, because at 3 o'clock, I'm parked out there in a handicap parked. And we can't put our credit card in twice to get 2 hours, so every hour I got to get back to right on the corner there of 3rd Avenue in Washington and put my credit card back in there to get 1 hour. Wouldn't you think somebody would have a half a brain and fix it? If we want to park 2 hours, we can put our card in twice, get 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and not have to make a cripple like me go back every hour. Put more, it's getting to me just trying to stand up. But anyway, I want to thank everyone. I call them the Phoenix 11. That's the mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Vint, your time is up. Mr. Rusnick is
No kidding,
next.
You're going to take my time.
Everyone gets 3 minutes, Mr. Vint.
Wait a minute, you were 5 minutes late. I want your 5 minutes.
Mr. Vint, everyone gets 3 minutes to speak for this council. Mr. Rusnick is next. Great to see you, Mr. Rusnick. Mr. Vint, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Mr. Rusnick, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I want to talk about Pat's piece of ground that he's got up north.
Please.
Ravenstein, one of the head inspectors, or maybe he's promoted now downtown, he was meeting with Pat and 8 people on that street of his. Then he told Pat, Pat, you have to dust-proof your land. He's got about an acre so up there. It cost Pat 75 tons of gravel, and it was the wrong size. He did not even know what size to put on the gravel. And then not only do we have that, it cost him about $1,300. And he threatened Pat with $2,500 a day fine or jail time if he didn't do it. Now, there's got to be something wrong somewhere. So I think you ought to look at all this dust-proof that's going on and make some changes somewhere, either dust-proof or don't dust-proof, none of it, because we're living in dust and nobody's doing it. So we got to do something. So the man who's going to speak after me next, I'm just going to a little bit talk about him. He had to dust-proof his driveway because he had no gravel on it, and the city just come up and told him you have to dust-proof it. Not only that, in a letter that I got from the attorney here, he told me that this man only uses his driveway in his backyard a few times. And I got 100 pictures. Nobody will look at my pictures. And Darcy would not look at my pictures. So what we have to do is I would like to make a meeting with you guys or somebody of authority to look at my pictures and see where we are. Because the last 2 years, in 17 and 18, that was used 35 times. And it's used all the time. And he said and the attorney wrote, it's infrequently used, like maybe twice a year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rusing, for your testimony and your service as well. Next speaker will be Mr. Brian Stanley, who has a citizen petition to present to the City Council. Mr. Stanley, good to see you.
Your Honor, honorable members of the City Council, I rise to present a petition under Chapter 4, Section 22 of the City Charter. I have the original in 9 copies right here.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the subject of the petition is pretty simple. There is a move afoot to make a substantial change to the street frontage part of Los Olivos Park, and it seems to have gone pretty far in the parks, before the Parks Board. And I don't know whether they just don't have an institutional memory that reaches back 45 years, or they don't have a systematic way of checking these things, or they never heard of the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act. But if you want to check with the State Parks Department, which is the liaison office for these things, the city got matching funds from the federal government under that act in 1971 and 1973. In its case, it made a commitment to preserve the land for public outdoor recreation use. And besides that, the federal statute requires, and it says, none of this land shall be converted to other than public outdoor recreation use without approval of the National Park Service. I'm pretty sure that nobody in the Parks Department has even thought of doing this and observing the statute. In fact, I kind of gathered the impression that the Parks Department doesn't really know about the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act, or if they do, they've found that sort of ignoring it and waiting for the National Park Service to come after them years later was the best way of sidestepping it. In any event, our petition simply requests that the city observe its commitments, observe the federal statute, and refrain from converting this land from other than public outdoor recreation use. I just would add that this conversion would deprive the relevant area, which I describe as the East Camelback Urban Village, south of Camelback Road, of 9% of its available public outdoor recreation space. And that, again, is those kind of statistics as to what this alteration would do to available public recreation space is another study which, to my surprise, I don't believe the Parks Department undertook. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanley, for that petition and your report and testimony. Next speaker will be Mr. Leonard Clark. And then it's followed by Mr. David Lehman.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor and council members, all you neoliberals on the council and conservatives. Thank you. I was born right down the street at Good Samaritan Hospital, Banner Health. But in all seriousness, there's been a young lady missing, Jasmine Dunbar from Phoenix, 51st and West Thomas Road, and I'm hoping that you'll tell all your friends. She was found, or her baby was found miles from her home, and we haven't seen her since. So her family and loved ones, I'm sure, are concerned, and I think this cable channel, it's one of our own residents. She's been missing since Tuesday. So if you know about her whereabouts, please contact her family so that, you know, she can be reunited with her baby, and I pray to God that she's all right. Secondly, there is a House bill moving through, and it does concern Phoenix because it's House Bill 2479, and unfortunately, this House bill will take, if it gets through and it gets its way, it will take many tax dollars from the city of Phoenix coffers. It's to help the great neoliberal Bezos, the world's richest man now, is named by Forbes just yesterday or the day before, to basically get him out of paying any taxes. He already owns the Washington Post. He can do whatever he wants. But I'm just asking you to tell your friends in the legislature, and I'm not picking just on Republicans, even though the governor's behind it. 5 Democrats voted for it. And I'm asking you, please, we need that. That could be funding for our fire department, our public service, departments, not to mention our educators that, you're not a school district board. But if this bill goes through, it's going to take away tens of millions of dollars, potential tens of millions of tax dollars to give the world's richest man a tax break, Mr. Liberal, neoliberal Bezos of the Washington Post. Please, and talk to your Democratic friends, because they're the ones voting with Republicans too. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Mr. Lehman? David Lehman, is he here? Oh, he's coming, I'm sorry. I should have given you more warning, go ahead. Great to see you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me speak here today, and if I'm not mistaken, this is your final meeting here?
Well, we haven't made any announcements in that regard, but is that wishful thinking on your part, if I may ask?
No,
I'm just kidding.
no, not at all. I'm glad I got to see got a chance to see you while you were here.
I hope he lets us know.
I look forward to supporting you as you move on. The reason I'm speaking today is I live in Sunny Slope, and the Sunny Slope, we have a group on next door, and we all talk about different things that are going on. There's crime, there's revitalization, there's all kinds of things that we speak of. And recently, there was a thing about transients, and somebody on the page said, it's just Sunny Slope. And I'm here to see what we can do to turn that saying into a positive saying. We've got Little Miss Barbecue is going to be opening, which is a great thing for our area. Shops are being revitalized at Hatcher and Central. The Hatcher Street revitalization that Councilwoman Starks is working on is a great thing. And even Circle K is opening a new location at Hatcher and 7th Street. Those are all positives. Now, the negatives are that Circle K is taking the place of one that's at Mountain View and 7th Street right now. That whole corner is scary. We have school children walking through there every day. There are transients, there are drug addicts, there are drug dealers, and there are prostitutes. They are there at the bus stop. They're not waiting for a bus. That's where they hang out. They also are from there going south towards Dunlap. It's horrendous for us to see the transients where we live in a community of 50 townhomes that is basically right across the street from that Circle K. We have had transients defecating in our driveways. We've had them urinating in our bushes. Our kids have found hypodermic needles in the shrubbery. You know, just today I was reading 5 hours ago, 2 bicycles were stolen, and on Saturday night, 2 of our townhomes were broken into. They're the ones that have given up and they're selling them, and they were vacant, thank God, but 2 were broken into. At that time, the police caught 2 people in one of the townhomes. Those 2 people were not arrested. They were not arrested. The next night, those same 2 people were found breaking into the restrooms in our community pool area and trying to sleep there. Again, they were not arrested. So, I would like to find out what is going on there, and I would like to have your help and everybody's help to move forward. The other thing is the CARES unit. We have some gentleman that's living on Carroll Street on the 600 block of East Carroll.
Thank you.
And
We have 3 minutes per speaker,
Oh.
but I think Councilwoman Stark represents Sunny Slope, and I think her professional staff is here, so maybe they can get a meeting with Mr. Lehman and start working, obviously.
I've had coffee with Mr. Lemon,
There you
and
go.
he's very concerned about Sunny Slope, and yes, I think some staff is here that already are aware of the issues. Thank you.
yeah, and Councilwoman Stark is fantastic. I want to keep working with her and her
We
team.
appreciate you coming down. I didn't mean to cut you off, but 3 minutes per person. I got to try to stay consistent. Thank you for coming, Mr. Lehman. We appreciate your advocacy. How about Ms. Barker?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council and public. Diane Barker, I'm in District 7. And what do we do on Wednesday? Yeah, you don't know because we changed the day. The Meet Me Downtown now has become Walk Phoenix Wednesday. And we're looking for you. We're looking for you to get out and join us at Hans Park. And we meet people. It's a social hour. You can walk. Some of you run. And we come back and we have raffle tickets for neat things. You know, I ate over at the Strand the other night, delicious food, and it was on a raffle ticket. We've had D-back tickets and Symphony, even the Suns. And those are all free tickets and fun things. And then when you have a friend that wins, then they take you. So I've posted these, and it's through the Parks Department. I've been volunteering and went through the different departments at the city yesterday. And you have a break room, so look for it on your break room to get the details. And the other neat thing, the city in a department has started a walk at noontime. So if you're down at City Hall, I believe that it is Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 11:30, you can walk with them too. So that's really a good sign. Now, out at the airport, we help people get around through the navigators, and Fit Phoenix, through the city of Phoenix again, has a mile that you can go through the American Airlines northern gates, and without going through security, which people love, you know, not having to go several times, and meet somebody that's on a Southwest flight. And it's automated, or you can walk, and they've got delicious restaurants to spend your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all our citizens' comments and cards. We are now moving to business. City Clerk reads the 24-hour paragraph.
The titles of the following ordinance and resolution numbers on the agenda were available to the public at least 24 hours prior to this council meeting and therefore may be read by title or agenda item only. Ordinances number G 6423 through 6438, S 44262, and 444296 through 44332. Resolution numbers 21615 through 21617.
Thank you. We have no approval of the minutes of meeting today. And item number 1 is boards and commissions.
Motion to approve City Council boards and commissions nominations.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. You're ready.
One person. We got one person.
Okay.
Fill in your name and then for the. I, and state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of, according to the best of my ability. So help me God. You're official. Thanks for your service very much. All right, now we'll move on to liquor licenses. Vice Mayor, is there an omnibus motion as it relates to liquor licenses?
Motion to approve items 1 through 18 and to withdraw item 19 from consideration.
Second.
That's the motion. There is a second. Any cards on those items? They're all in favor of the item. Any comments or questions from members of our council? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next on our agenda, ordinances, resolutions, new business, planning, and zoning. Vice Mayor, are we prepared with an omnibus motion?
Yes. Motion to approve items 20 through 97, except the following. Items 31, 36, 37, 38, 51, 52, 53, and 73 through 74. And 96. Items 36 is being requested to be continued March 21st, 2018. Items 58 and 96 are being withdrawn,
All right, that's the motion. Is there a second? There is a motion and a second. Mr. Labate, just to let you know, the item you wanted to provide testimony on, 96, is proposed to be withdrawn. Okay, so there is the motion. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Noakowski.
Yes.
Stark. Valenzuela.
Yes.
Waring. Williams.
Yes.
Pastor. Mayor Stanton.
Yes. Next item is item 31. Is there a motion on item 31, MAG dues?
Move item 31.
There's a motion and a second.
Second.
There is a second?
Yep.
Are there any cards on those items, or that item? Oops. I'll now turn to the council. Any questions or comments as it relates to MAG dues? I'll say some. Okay, roll call.
DeCiccio.
wait.
You know what?
Do you have a comment?
So I didn't pull it, but I did have a comment. So
Please.
The MAG is the receptacle for federal money, correct? So if we don't pay the dues, we don't get federal money for infrastructure projects. Is that a fair?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, that's a fair way to put it.
And normally, Mayor, you know, I sort of against dues if they don't do anything. In this case, they do something. I wasn't necessarily going to say that, but I didn't. That wasn't my pull. So.
It was mine, and I am going to vote no for other reasons.
Okay, any other comments or questions by members of our council?
Wow.
Roll call.
DeCiccio. Yes. Gallego.
Yes.
Noakowski.
Yes.
Stark.
No.
Valenzuela.
Yes.
Waring. Williams.
Yes.
Pastor. Mayor Stanton.
Yes, so that item passes on an 8-to-1 vote. I do want to note that the Executive Director of MAG is here, Mr. Dennis Smith. Good to see you. He recently announced his retirement after how many years as leading MAG? 41 years, so congratulations. Please give him a round of applause. He deserves it. Yep. I've had a chance to work with you both as a council member and as mayor during that time, and I've always appreciated your professionalism, ethics, and willing to listen to everyone, and it's been a very effective organization in my opinion, so thank you very much. Congratulations. All right, next on the agenda is item 36.
Move item 30.
Wait a minute.
Wait,
I thought it was an omnibus as a continuance.
it was. No.
So it is not 36?
No, we have
Request to
36
continue
out,
to March
'cause you've got a
21st,
card.
2018.
I'm sorry, it was pulled out. I apologize. Okay. Okay, so the request is to continue to March 21st. Is there a second on that item? Is there a second? Second. Okay. Mr. Gilbert, did you have testimony as it relates to a continuance on item 36? I do not. You do not, okay. And there are other folks here in favor of the continuance? So all in favor of the motion? Any comments by members of the council?
Mayor?
Councilman DeCiccio, please.
I'm basically of the belief that this just thing ought to be settled and settled today, but I'll go along with the continuance, go along with the council on this. But the bottom line is, the letter that was sent was horrible. My understanding is that there's some type of retraction coming back. But in any respect, the letter that was sent attacking one of the council members was just uncalled for, even though I guess there's some sort of retraction occurring or something like that. I don't know, but it was horrible. And that has completely changed my position on the way I think I would look at some of these, especially this issue.
Okay, any other comments on the continuance by members of this council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Continuance passes unanimously. Next is item 37. Item 37 is a request by myself and a couple of the council members for an 8-hour rule exception requesting the city staff research potential city charter amendment regarding election funding disclosure. Is there a motion on 37?
Move item 37.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Are there any cards on 37? There are 2 cards. How about Mr. Leonard Clark? Are you neutral on that item? You want to come forward and talk about the item 37?
Thank you, Mayor. I can switch it over. I just wanted to be sure and hear to get more clarity. I didn't know. Yeah, anytime that we can help make the system more democratic, because we are living in an oligarchy anyways, you know, with Citizens United and everything, I'm not sure if this will affect you guys when you're running for mayor. I mean, this would go into effect after your election, but the fact that you're doing it, I mean, it's something, but it's not going to eliminate all the not-for-profits out there who get to spend money and not disclose their donors. This is just going to, I guess, stop you from, as a politician, if I'm running for mayor or dog catcher, which I don't think they have here, but as an example, then if, you know, some person wants to come in and throw cash in the last 8 hours. So I'm not sure if this will, since I'm not an expert on the campaign finance law, if this is going to bring us into sync with the state campaign finance laws. So I think it sounds like a good idea. I'm just wondering if it's going to be precluded by state law, if it's already violate. I mean, if the state law is already saying you can't do that. But if not, anytime we can bring more disclosure in political campaigns, whether you're a Democrat and a big union is funding you, or you're a Republican and the Koch brothers are funding you, I think it's a good idea. Thank you. So you can change me to a yes.
All right, thank you very much. In favor, Morgan Dick, in favor of the item, please come forward and provide any testimony you have, up to 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. My name is Morgan Dick, and I'm here today on behalf of the Arizona Advocacy Network. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to improve voting rights, mitigate the influence of money in politics, and help keep our courts fair and independent. I'm also a proud City of Phoenix resident, and I'm here today to speak in support of this proposal to explore this potential charter amendment. So first of all, thank you so much to Mayor and Councilwoman Gallego for bringing this issue forward. As you all know, Arizona has seen a huge increase in unaccountable dark money spending in the last few election cycles. Unfortunately, this mirrors the national trend, and local elections are likely to become the next victim. So Phoenix need not wait for somebody to pour money into one of its elections while hiding behind meaningless nonprofit names. You can all act now, like as other cities like Tempe, Austin, and Denver already have. By way of explanation, imagine a televised campaign ad. At the end, a candidate would appear on the screen and say, "I approve this message." So you know his or her own campaign committee paid for the ad. Other television ads may simply say, "Paid for by Phoenicians for a Better Phoenix." We believe this potential charter amendment would simply ask for groups like Phoenicians for a Better Phoenix or other independent expenditure groups to disclose who they really are, a person, group of people, or any other entity. In other words, it is our understanding that the proposal would not affect how direct contributions to candidates' campaigns are accounted or reported. This proposal aims to propose transparency for independent expenditure groups who currently do not have to disclose the original source of their funds. You absolutely all have the authority to do this, as held in the state versus the city of Tucson. Local elections are a matter of local control, and the Arizona Supreme Court has reaffirmed that the method and manner of conducting elections in the city is peculiarly the subject of local interest and is not a matter of statewide concern. Courts have been consistent on that point for decades, and furthermore, disclosure ordinances do not violate the First Amendment, as the United States Supreme Court explicitly held in its infamous Citizens United decision. Justice Kennedy, in his opinion of the court, said, "The First Amendment protects political speech, and disclosure permits citizens and shareholders to react to this speech of corporate entities in a proper way. Transparency enables the electorate to make informed decisions and give proper weight to different speakers and messages." With this potential charter amendment, Phoenix is simply giving voters the opportunity to make more informed decisions at the ballot. So in conclusion, AZAN looks forward to supporting this process.
Thank you very
all.
much, Ms. Dick. Are there any questions for any of our speakers, Mr. Clark or Ms. Dick? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. I'll now turn to council members. Any comments by members of the council? Councilwoman Gallego, please.
Thank you. I helped bring this forward along with Councilwoman Stark and Mayor Stanton, and thank you both for your partnership on this. This is just the beginning of a process, so we will now begin working to draft language, but it is incredibly important, as Morgan eloquently illustrated. We have had over $20 million in anonymous contributions in our state elections. An individual who contributes to a campaign has to disclose his or her contribution, and the same should be true of corporations or incredibly wealthy individuals who are contributing. It's good for democracy to know who is participating, and we can ask questions about why. Speech is important, and it's valuable that we have people participating in our elections, but we ought to have a level playing field where everyone is disclosing. There was a great piece in the Arizona Republic this weekend, a multi-partisan piece with several former mayors, Democrats, Republicans, and others talking about the value of open and fair elections, and just shows that this is something that applies across party lines. Everyone wants to understand who's involved in the elections and why, and so this will be a great opportunity to have a public process and come up with a fair way to have disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments by members of the council? Councilwoman Stark, please.
Yes, I'd like to echo your comments. Councilwoman Gallego, you're right. It should be about public disclosure and having the public have all the facts. And I would also hope before someone puts out independent expenditure in the future that they would think twice about the information that they're sharing. I hope it'll help a little bit more with civil discourse as well.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Stark. Any other comments by member of the council? Councilman DeCiccio, please.
Mayor, I'm not going to be supporting it. I've been the victim of the government unions pouring $1.1 million opposing me in 2 elections ago. So I know what it feels like to have the large government unions that control a big part of City Hall to be opposing me. But at the same time, I believe that they have a right to be able to do that on their own without fear of anyone. I think people have a right to make, basically, they have a right to oppose me without having to disclose who they are. And so, I've probably been the biggest victim here of all, so people would find this kind of odd. But at the same time, I do think that people have rights to be able to do that for the same reason I believe that they had a right to be involved in campaigns and be involved in elections. I think you remember, even though that would go contrary to most of the beliefs that I have, but at the same time they have a right to do those things, and they have a right to be anonymous if they want to be. That's what this America is about. People have rights, they have constitutional rights to be able to give free speech, but not everybody needs to know who they are. And at the end of the day, I just can't support this just because I believe it goes against the fundamental foundation of our country, of freedom of speech, and even if that speech is anonymous. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Any other comments by members of the council? Okay, I'll certainly be supporting the motion. This is another opportunity for cities to show great leadership. In this case, great leadership in terms of trying to end the flood of dark money that comes into the campaign in an anonymous way. Tempe's a little bit ahead of us on this one, but I think it's appropriate that us, as the largest city in the state, once again step up to the plate and show great leadership on an issue of great import, not only here but around the country. It's one of the hot issues of the day. And I'll respectfully disagree with Councilman DeCiccio. People certainly have the right to participate in elections and give whatever opinion they want, but they don't have the right, I believe, to do so in an anonymous way. Flood campaigns with money and do so in an anonymous way. And this is an important area for us to stand up and say, we as a city have the right to say no, that you can't get involved in anonymous dark money campaigns. And I'm hopeful that this will be successful. It will get on the ballot, and the people of Phoenix will agree with this position. Other comments? Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Noakowski.
Yes.
Stark. Valenzuela. Waring. Williams. Pastor.
No.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes, so the motion passes 6-3, and we'll see this on a future agenda as staff puts together their research and provide information to this council. All right, next on the agenda is item number 38. 38 is also an 8-hour rule requesting research land to land located along the South Central Avenue and the Rio Salado. Is there a motion on 38?
Move item 38.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Motion and a second. Are there any cards on 38? Any comments by members of the City Council? Roll call.
DeCiccio. No. Gallego.
Yes.
Noakowski.
Yes.
Stark. Valenzuela. Yes. Waring. Williams. Pastor.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes. So I think that was 7-2 for the 8-hour rule on 38. That also will be researched by staff and presented at a future City Council meeting for potential action. Next on the agenda is item number 51.
Move item 51.
There's a motion and a second on 51. Mr. Leonard Clark?
Hello, my name's Leonard Clark. I was born right down the street at Phoenix Good Samaritan Hospital, now known as Banner Health. I'm here to speak up for the lifeguards. Even though I swim like a rock, I can barely swim. The lifeguards should benefit from Proposition 206, even though hopefully that bill's dead in the Senate, but they deserve a pay raise. After all, they save people's lives, so I strongly recommend that you pass this. Proposition 206 was a great proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard Clark. That was all the cards. Councilman Waring?
Thanks, Vice Mayor. So I guess it's a question for staff. I don't know who it would be, or maybe Ed. But we have to do this because of the initiative that passed, correct?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, Parks Director Inger Erickson is here for specifically, but yes, this is directly related to Proposition 206, raising the minimum wage. Inger?
Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the council, indeed, they were at 1030, and because the new minimum wage is 1050, we have to get to that level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Noakowski. Stark. Valenzuela.
Yes.
Waring. Williams. Pastor.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes. So that passes unanimously, I believe? Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 53. Item number 53 is follow-up back from a previous item before this council in which we asked staff to come back and provide options for city council elections. I believe that there was about a 10-minute presentation from our professional city staff. What's that?
I'm sorry, Mayor. We think we didn't catch it on here, but I believe that item 52 was held out of your omnibus. So we actually need to do 52, but you can do it after this item, so.
Okay, so we'll continue with 53. So we have a short presentation from our professional city staff, and then, are there a lot of cards on 53? How many cards do we have? Public. Few cards on 53, and we're lucky that our friend Adrian Fontes, who runs the elections at the county, is here to, I hope, provide some common sense wisdom to us as we make this very important decision. If you have any testimony, just here to watch, and then obviously available to answer questions about how it works between the city and the county. Thank you for taking the time to be here on this important issue. All right, I'll now hand it over to Tony Macaron.
Good afternoon, Mayor Stanton and council members. City Clerk Chris Meyer is here today. He'll present a brief overview and then also will be available for questions.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. You asked for information regarding consolidation elections. We've looked at several options and have some information to report to you on the impact and some issues that it would present that would need to be resolved. And charter amendments would be required that would have to go to the voters in order to do this. First of all, some background on city elections. Phoenix is the second largest election jurisdiction in the state, and second to Maricopa County, of course. And we have conducted our elections ourselves for the city since incorporation in 1881. The city changed from having elections in the spring to the fall of odd years in 1949. The city has been a leader in elections around the state and has introduced several innovative measures. We were the first to implement the permanent early voting list, and we did that in 1997. The state followed in, I believe, about 2004. And then we were also the first to develop and use voting centers in 2011, and there's 3 or 4 counties now that have gone to the voting center model, and they started using our model. There's some differences between city and county elections that we need to point out to realize the significance of some of the issues with possible consolidation. First, city elections are nonpartisan, and so we have a general and a runoff system. So the August election is really our general election. Candidates and propositions appear on the August ballot, and if a candidate is elected, if they receive a majority of the votes cast for the office in August, and that's 50% plus 1. The system that we use avoids or reduces the cost of a second election. In a primary and general, you always have 2 elections. With the general and runoff, you only have the runoff if someone doesn't receive a majority of the votes cast. And since 1991, 70% of the city offices were elected without a runoff election. In the state, elections, on the contrary, are partisan elections. There's a primary and then a general. The primary is in August, and it is a partisan election where the voters select candidates to represent that party on the ballot in November. The general election in November is candidates and propositions statewide, and there are always 2 elections in the primary and general cycle. We looked at the turnout in the elections, and in the November elections, when we have the governor and president on the ballots in the state general elections, the turnout, as you can see, is significantly higher than what the city typically gets. If you compare those, in a presidential race, you're up around 70 to 75% turnout, and in a governor's race, it's about 43% turnout. This comparison is the turnout for city voters who actually cast ballots in those elections, not the overall countywide turnout. But with the city election, general election actually being in August, we also looked at the turnout for the primary in August. And as you can see, the turnout in the primary elections is not much different. The state is slightly higher. In a couple of the elections, it's 2 to 3% higher. And in one election cycle in 2013 and 14, the turnout was the same, the city election and the state primary election. We also looked at the costs over the last 20 years. And these cost estimates in the chart are based on the city's cost, approximate cost for conducting an election on any date is about $1 million using the voting center model. If we consolidate elections with the county, the cost to have the ballot items or have our election on the county ballot is about $500,000 for the city of Phoenix for an election. However, if we have a county conduct an election on another date because of the voting center or the polling place model that they use, and we're not sharing costs with anybody like in the general election, the cost is about $2 million for us to have the county conduct an election. So we looked at the last 20 years, and over that period of time, the cost for the city to conduct them or to consolidate with the county was almost the same, $22.6 million versus $22.69 million. So there wasn't much difference in cost. But I want to point out that the savings, as you can see on the diagram, the savings from the consolidated elections, where you see the green dots for the county down low around the $500,000 mark, are offset by the special elections at the $2 million cost. So in order to save money for the city in consolidating elections, we would have to reduce the number of special elections that we're conducting, because the cost to conduct a special is 4 times the cost of conducting a consolidated election. One issue that would need to be addressed, or we need to look at, it's created by combining the city's nonpartisan election with the August partisan primary election, is the permanent early voting list and the independents that are on that list. In a partisan primary election, because of the open primaries, Voters registered as an independent on the people do not automatically receive a ballot by mail. Independents must notify the county which ballot type to mail, either one of the party ballots or a city nonpartisan ballot. The voters can do that by designating it on a return postcard that the county provides, or they can do it online, or they can phone the county to make that designation. But in recent elections, over 80% of the independents on the people have not made that designation and so did not receive automatically a ballot by mail for those August primary elections. If an independent receives and votes the nonpartisan city ballot, they cannot then vote in the party election because they will have already voted in the election. The nonpartisan races are also on the party ballot. So those are potential concerns. Just to put that in perspective for the city elections, here's a breakdown of the city registered voters by party. Independents are the largest group at 255,000. Democrats are next at 252. Republicans at 205,000. Other is 10,000. So the total's 723,000 registered voters in the city. As far as what happened as far as requesting ballots in the last couple of county elections, you'll notice in the primary election in August of 2016, 62,880 voters, or 15%, requested the mail ballot, responded to that to designate the party. And in 2014, it was 18, almost 19% actually requested the party. So over 80% in both did not receive the ballot automatically. And whereas in city elections, because we're nonpartisan, it's not an issue, and we mail ballots to all of the voters on the permanent early voting list for all of the elections that we have. And there's about 148,000 or 150,000 registered independents on the permanent early voting list in the city of Phoenix. We were also asked to look at a November-March election cycle. The charter and state law are designed for candidate election cycles in the spring and the fall. There's that 12-week gap between the March and the May and the August and the November elections. There's no other jurisdiction in Arizona that we could find that uses a November and March cycle, so it's just unique. We didn't have anything to compare it to as far as cost or turnout. One change that would happen if we did this would be that the terms would begin after the March runoff election. Just as if a candidate gets elected in August now, they don't take office until January after the November runoff. The same would be true in this case. It's just that there's a longer period of time until the runoff in March, so the terms would begin in either April or May, and that's when they would change. If candidates elected in November, that means there's about a 6-month delay before they would take office and before the current council members would leave office. And the runoff campaign would be about 5 months long. And just a note, we get comments and questions and complaints about political signs. Those signs would be able to remain up during that period of time under current state law. The terms would change in the middle of the budget process near the end of the council session before some of the break. A lot of the budget is adopted by them, but the final actions are not done until the end, and you have a new council coming in the middle of that process. The March election would be all mail under the county's new policies. And there would be limited space for ballot measures on the ballot in November. County estimates there's space for 2 to 4 measures, usually in November. There's more room in the August ballot for propositions because there's less items on the August ballot. Another issue that we've identified that would have to be resolved applies to either the August-November cycle or the November-March cycle, and that is the alternate expenditure limitation. It's a constitutional spending limitation on cities from a formula. Voters in a jurisdiction can override that limitation. It's commonly referred to as the home rule option. Voter approval at a regular candidate election is required. It's scheduled next for us on the ballot in 2019 with the mayor election. Phoenix voters approved in the last expenditure limitation in 2015, and that's valid through June of 2020. The approved limit would expire before the fall of 2020 candidate elections if we consolidated. There would require a budget reduction of over $1 billion if we did not have the alternate spending limit, and a penalty for exceeding the limit is about $70 million based on 1/3 of our share of the state income tax revenues. There is no other legal mechanism that we've been able to identify to extend or adopt the interim limit. And the only one we've been able to identify is what was used by the legislature for the consolidation of the non-charter cities back in 2012. The state legislature adopted a provision extending the existing home rule options for an additional year to align with the even-numbered elections. And that would be, appears to be the only solution that we would have this time, would be for the legislature to adopt that extension. We mentioned that some charter amendments would be required. We believe that 3 ballot measures would be required to encompass about 7 different charter amendments. And those amendments would be to change the candidate elections to the fall of even years, and then extend the current terms for 1 additional year, longer for the November-March cycle, in order to align with the new election dates in the spring, or in the fall of even years, I'm sorry. And there's also a current provision in the charter that prohibits consolidating candidate elections for the city with elections, the primary and general election for the state, so that would need to be amended. The canvass of vote would have to be changed to occur a little bit later. We currently complete it within 15 days of the election. With the county and the volume of votes and offices that they have to count, it would not be assured that we would receive the votes within that 15 days, so we'd have to extend that a week or so to be able to get the results and canvass the vote. And then the polling place locations, we have charter amendment that, or charter provision that requires polling places to be in the city and where they are. We would need to change to allow the county to designate the polling places that they are designating for the general election and for them to be used. Some additional charter amendments that would be separate ballot measures. They're not close enough related to be in the same measure. Our charter currently requires the full text of charter amendments to be placed on the ballot unless it's referred by the council unanimously. We need to eliminate that unanimous vote requirement because there would probably not be space on the county ballots to put the full text of our measures on the ballot. In some cases there might be, but in others there would not. And then we have a salary commission that's appointed in the years of an election. We would need to change that to the even years to coincide with the elections in the even years. There's also 3 charter amendments that we are recommending to address the issue of the special elections and to try to reduce the number of special elections so the consolidation would produce savings. But these are optional. They're not required in order to make the change to even-numbered years. One would be to remove the unique requirement for special elections for vacancies and appoint until the next regular candidate or citywide election. City of Phoenix is unique in requiring elections to fill vacancies when there's more than a year left in the term. Most jurisdictions wait until the next regular election for candidates, so up to a period of 2 years. On the initiatives, Phoenix also is the only jurisdiction in the state, I believe, that requires a special election if an initiative petition is filed and it is sufficient. Most jurisdictions, you file them and they are placed on the next general election ballot whenever that would occur. State measures always go on the general election ballot in even-numbered years, and the petitions are circulated during the 2-year gap in between. Several of our special elections over the years have been because of initiatives that have been filed and were certified sufficient. A last change that we suggest would be to change a requirement for the city clerk to verify all of the signatures that are filed on an initiative and referendum petition to go to a random sample. That's a concern for costs. It's also a concern that checking all the signatures takes more time, and we'd be concerned with trying to consolidate our elections into the fall of the even years that we could miss that cycle and have to have a special election or have to wait even longer to get a measure on the ballot. So that just expedites getting initiatives onto the ballot in the 2-year cycle on even years. One other question we'd have to look at would be when the ballot measures to amend the charter for the even year elections would be sent to the ballot. There has been discussion about as many as 10 potential ballot measures on the ballot this fall, including the ones related to the changing the election dates. So consolidation, there would be 3 measures. Again, that would change the election dates, extending the council terms, the canvass, and the polls. 3 charter amendments to reduce special elections, the vacancy initiative and the random sample that we just talked about. We have the sexual harassment item that was just passed by the council and a provision to provide for removal from office for violations of that to go on the ballot. The Southwest Gas franchise has to be renewed. It's up this year. And then the campaign finance regulation item that was just talked about earlier, if that would go forward and be referred, could go on the ballot in either August or November. And then there's currently a pension initiative pending, and if that was filed, that could be on the ballot in August or November. So that's the 10 potential measures. Putting them on the August of 2018 state primary election ballot would cost about $500,000. There's space for 6 to 8 measures, and I'm told by the county that could possibly be more on the August ballot, and could definitely be more if we paid an additional fee to use the back of the ballot. And if we put those items on the August ballot or referred them in August, then they could go on the November ballot if there was not room for all of them in the August ballot. On the November ballot, the state general election, again, the cost would be $500,000 because of the consolidation and sharing with other jurisdictions. But the county's best estimates is the ballot space would be for only 2 to 4 measures. It might be more, might be less, depending on what they end up with from the state measures and other issues on the ballot. So the options for you to consider are to maintain candidate elections in the odd years as we conduct them now, using voting centers, or we could go to all mail. Or to consolidate candidate elections the even years, and it could be done in either an August-November cycle or a November-March cycle. And if we consolidate, we would need to refer charter amendments to the ballot, 7 required amendments and 3 propositions to make the change to even years, the 3 optional amendments to address the special election issues, and then we would need to, at the same time, seek state legislation to address the home rule issue, and then these ballots could be referred, as we just talked about, in either August or November, but there's concerns with ballot space in November. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for our city clerk at this time? Obviously, we'll have a chance to have some citizen comments as well, so we'll have plenty of time to ask questions of either Chris, and then again, our county recorder was kind enough to be here today. Any questions for Adrian Fontes about how this might work as a practical matter as well? All right, let's go to the cards then first to just hear it. Can we put the options to consider screen on there so the folks giving testimony can indicate which of the options they are most supportive of or most in opposition to? First speaker, Carol Bartholomew, great to see you, followed by Keith Broadwater, followed by Marcus Huey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayors and council, and especially my councilwoman, Thelda Williams. I'm representing the Citizens Business League, which represents more than 4,500 Phoenix business owners and executives. They are very strongly supporting the idea of consolidation because they feel that that's the best use of our money and our time. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you for being here. Great to
Thank
see you.
And Mayor,
Thank you.
could I just thank Carol for all she does in the city? I didn't even see you when you were sitting there. You're sitting right next to Steve Betts. Yeah, I know. I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, thanks for everything you do, Carol. You bet.
Keith Broadwater.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the subject of consolidated elections or aligned elections, whichever you prefer. My name is Keith Broadwater, and I live in LD 20, City Council District 3. Ms. Stark, specifically Moon Valley and Canterbury Precinct. I stand here today to lend my support for consolidating our elections for the City of Phoenix. The reasons are utterly obvious and self-explanatory and are loaded with common sense. It will save the city and its people a lot of time, energy, and money. All this up here, all of this it's a lot of work, but the bottom line is the City of Phoenix and its residents don't have a lot of time, energy, and money, and consolidating the elections saves us all. A constitutional representative government thrives on voter turnout. And that's what this is all about. Low voter turnout has been the acceptable norm in Phoenix for decades. It must change. A 10-minute internet search of voter participation on major legislation and elections proves that the majority of time there is less than 20% voter turnout, 23, 25. We've seen it as low as 15. Mesa, Scottsdale, Gilbert have all consolidated their elections, and they have up to 85%, Scottsdale, participation. That's what it's about. It's about we the people participating in the electoral process, not 20%. This is a crime and a shame. The city of Phoenix must align its elections with the state primary and general election, which is the established norm nationwide. How could any of you vote against increasing citizen turnout and involvement in our election process?
Our 2 minutes are up, so I don't know if you have a final point you want to make. I got other speakers as well, please.
I'm sorry, 2 minutes goes by really
It
fast.
does, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, just vote, do what's right, and let's get a lot more people to the polls. That's what this does. It gets a lot more people voting. Thank you for your time today. Thanks.
How
for
about
the
Marcus
2
Huey,
minutes.
and then followed by Mr. Leonard Clark?
Mayor, if it's okay, I've spoken twice on this subject in other city council meetings. Could I cede my time to Brian?
Please, whoever, yeah, please go ahead. Just state your name for the record and up to 2 minutes. Good to see you.
Yeah, I filled out the white card by mistake. Brian Lisinski. Brian
Right,
Joseph.
okay, good. Please, go ahead.
So I'm Brian Joseph Lisinski, LD 15, District 2. I'm in favor of consolidated elections. Once again, even on the chart, it shows even on presidential elections, it's about 20%. And when Scottsdale moved to consolidated elections, once again, it went up to about 85%. So we need to get the numbers up. And the Phoenix Transportation Sales Tax passed. It was a $31.5 billion, and that passed with less than 10% of the voters. So we really need to get voter turnout. The League of Arizona Cities and Towns shows that about 60% of the population are in favor of consolidated elections. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that testimony. How about Leonard Clark? Did you want to provide testimony on this item?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. You know, I believe I put neutral. If I didn't, that's what I meant to put, but now...
Neutral, but I don't know if neutral on which of those, because there's various options. So
well, I just wanted to say, I wanted to hear what my fellow citizens had to say, because many of them are very experienced in this and have been doing this a lot longer than I have been coming to these meetings. So I'm not sure if I have to change my opinion. I wanted to make sure I heard everybody, and this sounds like a very good idea. Anything to get more voters to come out. As you know, we have great cynicism now, and I just want to thank our Maricopa County Recorder, who's sitting in the audience, for all of his hard work, because in this day and age, we need to get our citizens to come back to vote right now. They're very, very cynical. It doesn't matter what party you're in. They're questioning the system, the computer hackable system that we all hear about. Let's go back to paper ballots. Thank you.
thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Okay, so that's all the citizen comments we have on this item, item 53. Did you want to provide something else?
Even years, not odd years. That's what I was staying for.
We got the drift of it, yeah, and that was good testimony. Okay, so without any other citizen comments, I'll now hand to Councilwoman Stark for any comments, see if she has a motion to put on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, I do, but before I make a motion, I actually did have an election in November of a even year, and we did have a better turnout. In November, we had a better turnout, not as good of turnout as the presidential vote, but still much better than an election that would be in an odd year. And I think we benefited from that. Obviously, I liked it because I got 41%, but that's not the reason. I do really believe that we need to have the best voter turnout. And I know what we're doing today is just acting on, should we move forward to look at some charter amendments. We're not really voting today on what the wording would be, because we have to ask our clerk and our city attorney to look more into it and how we would craft some language and how we would place it on the ballot. But I would like to make a motion, and then I would move to ask the city clerk to draft charter amendment language that would change the election cycle for mayor and council elections to November and even years. The reason I say November is the concern of the independents. And as a mother of 2 independents, I don't want to make it difficult for my children to vote. And so November, I think, is better. You will get the best turnout. I saw that in my election. So to November and even years, and then runoff elections would be in the following March. This would include reviewing how the mayor and council term lengths might be affected. I realize that we could have an additional year, and so I think we need to have the clerk look at that language as well. And then lastly, the actual date that then the council would become a council member. So, and then as a part of that motion, I would also like the clerk to explore the language related to special elections that are taken to the voters for issues such as bonds, franchise agreements, referendums, initiatives, and the like. I don't want to hold those up. And in some cases, we do have an initiative of our voters, and for them then to wait when they may want to move on something. So I think we need to look at that flexibility. I think that's pretty important. And also, while you're drafting this language, I'm just putting out a lot of work to you, Chris. I apologize in advance. By the way, Mr. Fontes, you should be jealous. We have the best clerk in the state of Arizona. I know you do a good job, but he is the best. I digress. No reflection on you. We're just lucky because we have Chris.
We're lucky that the best county recorder in the state of Arizona is in the room with us today, I think.
To our best.
The best city clerk is right with us as well, so we're lucky.
Exactly. So while you're working on that, I also think we should have some educational outreach and some public input process so that the public knows what we're doing. I don't want them, to think that we're automatically going to do this. I think we still need to educate. You have to work on the language. And I think we do want to get input from everybody. I know we have a lot of people down here today, but I still think we need to do better outreach. So that would be my motion. Is that, looking at Chris, have I missed something from your options? Okay, thank you. That would be my motion.
Mayor? I will.
So that was the motion. Again, it's a conceptual motion because the actual language that we would vote on will be coming back before us.
Right.
But conceptually, as I understand, I'll try to explain it and tell me if I'm wrong. Councilwoman Stark has made a motion in favor of the Stark model of getting elected, a November general election with a March runoff, and the indication, though, that initiatives and referendums would not be forced to be on the November. That would stay under her motion. Initiative referendum would say the current way, which is if the citizens get enough signatures to get something on the ballot, we could then have an election not on the November even year cycle. There's going to be a lot of questions on that, so that's the general that's the motion. There was a second. Councilman Williams, please.
I'm going to support this because it does solve the problem. My concern was the independence, not having to go through a separate step to get the ballot. And I think that really, I know in my family, I have a couple member, if I wasn't me, they wouldn't vote. They don't have an option as long as mom's around. But they don't like to take that extra step. And I think we need to, if we want to really encourage people to vote, you have to make it as simple and easy as possible for them to do that. And I think this does it. My second concern is I wanted to make sure we had the option for spatial elections if the need arises. And I think that's very important for this city. There have been times, really all too often, that really demanded the need. And I want to make sure that we continue to have that option. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. Vice Mayor, do you have questions?
I have a question about the motion. Does that also include the additional year to council people?
Yes, that would include reviewing how the mayor and council terms are affected. Yeah, so that would be language that the clerk and the city attorney would have to look at as well.
Okay.
This is on the length of terms. I think it's an issue that has to be looked at both legally, and then we would decide if there is support in this council, we would then later decide whether, even if we legally could, whether we want that as a separate item on the ballot. Vice Mayor.
So yes, for me, it's very important. I know people are speaking about voter turnout, but there's several pieces to this languaging that affect the council. And due to transparency's sake and really not taking this out to the public to discuss it with the public and how this is moving, I would, in this whole process, what will happen is this amendment or this would be placed on the ballot, but it would be increasing council people's years by 1 term. 1 year term, 1 year. Am I correct, Chris?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yes. In order to go from fall of odd years to a fall of even year, you would need to bridge the gap and extend the terms of the current council 1 year.
Actually, a little more than 1 year, but a year and a few months, yeah.
That's correct. With the going to March runoff, it'd be a little more than a year.
Okay, and so that's why I have, I'm glad it's part of the motion, because that's one of the items that I would like to see voters to vote on, because if it is voted, say, not to extend it, then what's the possibility? Can you?
I have not looked at other options for that. That's been what has happened with other jurisdictions that have changed and extended. They've extended the terms. I suppose an option is shortening them, or we could look at some other options, but that's not something.
But that is the possible option of shortening them and possibly by 3 months. It could be shortened to 3 months. I know that I'm asking these questions because I want to get it on the record and I want to be transparent about it.
We'll have to do the research. I'm not sure whether shortening the terms of what the voters elected would work or not. We just haven't looked at that I'm aware of. But we can. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Apparently that did happen in Peoria, the city of Peoria. Councilman Stark, former employee of Peoria, what happened in Peoria?
Yeah, in Peoria, when they moved from, they had March, May elections, they moved to August, September. In doing so, the mayor didn't serve his full 4 years.
Mayor, Councilman Stark, yes, in the consolidation, when everyone consolidated, there was legislation that was passed at the state that aligned everybody's terms that consolidated. So Peoria didn't actually do that, I don't think. I think it was kind of done. But because they went from spring to fall instead of spring to spring and backed it up, it did shorten their terms.
Vice Mayor.
I don't know. This is kind of, because we haven't really discussed it, but in the future, there will be possibly, there'll be the mayor's seat and then possibly 2 council seats that will be, someone will be appointed into those positions. My question is, one of the seats has pretty much a range of a full term. When that person gets appointed, will they be serving out the full term as if this amendment or language is on the ballot? What happens to the terms of appointment? I don't know who can answer. Brad, Chris, who?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, when someone is elected or appointed for, it's to fill a vacancy in a term, it's to whatever term was there. It doesn't change the term. So if they were appointed and then the term would be changed, say through this measure and lengthened, then it would lengthen that term.
So the term would be extended?
That's correct.
Okay, I think what the Vice Mayor is asking about is, let's say in a month or so, before this would have passed, there is a vacancy on the city council. Does this affect those vacancies?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, I'm sorry, no, what I described would not happen unless the measure took effect. Under the current rules now, if there's more than a year left in the term, there would be a special election called by the council to occur not less than 120 days from the date it's called, and then they would be elected to fill whatever was left of that term.
And that all depends on what point we put it on the ballot, August or November, correct?
That's correct.
Because I guess my question is, if we put it on the August ballot, what is the timeline?
If we put on the August ballot and it passed to consolidate the elections into November and March, it would It would apply to the next term of the council,
Okay.
which wouldn't be until it'd move from 2019 to 2020,
When?
term beginning in 2020 or 2021, depending on how we aligned it.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Vice Mayor, any additional questions? Okay, Councilman DeCiccio, please.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, Chris, if you don't mind. How many cities and towns throughout the state of Arizona have already consolidated their elections?
Mayor, Vice Member, or Councilmember DeCiccio, there are all but 19 charter cities that were not required to consolidate. 9 of those 19 have not yet consolidated, so.
But how about everybody else? How many cities and towns do we have in the state of Arizona that have already consolidated?
I believe there's about 90 cities and towns.
A little over 90.
Right, and
So-
only 19 of those are charter cities, so all the other ones were required by the state legislation to consolidate, and they did consolidate. It's
So
the charter
80
cities that did not have to.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So approximately 81 cities and towns throughout the state of Arizona have already consolidated their elections. And then approximately 9 have not or have some sort of modification to that, correct?
That's correct.
So of those 9, how many of them are off, what you would consider to be off-cycle? Like Phoenix? 3?
There are, I believe it's 3 or 4 that are in the fall of odd years, and the rest of them, 4 or 5 of them are in the spring of either even or odd years.
So approximately out of 90 cities, 3 are not in the norm, and Phoenix would be one of those that have not done some type of alignment or some type of consolidation. Somewhere right around there.
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, I pulled the information up. There are 3 jurisdictions that are in the spring of even years, and 2 in the spring of odd years, and 4 in the fall of odd years. And there's 82 hold them consolidated in the even years, the other 82 cities and towns.
So approximately then 82.
So yes, I mean, I believe the answer to your question is yes, that's correct. But we need to remember that only the 19 charter cities had any option about whether to do that or not. It was the legislature required it, and only charter cities had an option.
But it seems to be working pretty well with other cities. I mean, they've already done it. If I could too, did someone second the motion? If not, oh, you did? Okay, Tel did. Thank you. Just want to make sure. And then the other part of it deals with the turnout. One of the things we had discussed at one point was that if turnout increases, it might actually cost more money for an election, correct?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, yes, generally in any election, you can estimate what the cost is going to be, but the more people that vote, the more ballots are issued, the more ballots are mailed, the more that you have to process. So the cost to conduct the election does increase to some extent with increased turnout.
I would consider that, not for you to respond to, but on my end of it, I would consider that to be a good problem to have because, the city of Phoenix, even last year, we spent, I think, $125,000 trying to increase turnout when a simple move of moving an election date would have been able to increase turnout approximately anywhere between 20 and 40% if it was a November election.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, that's correct. The differences are about 20 to 40%. And one thing to add about the cost, even though the cost does go up, usually when that happens, the cost per ballot, if you divide the cost by the number of ballots that were cast, goes down with the higher turnout.
And from my end of it, this is one of those times where I don't mind spending a little more money on something because at the end of the day, you get higher voter turnout, you get more participation, you get more active electorate in the system. The other part of it deals with Hispanic turnout. I mean, the city of Phoenix is approximately 40% Hispanic. If you look at those districts in those areas, at least this is from my look at it, they had fairly low turnout. But in the general election, in a November election, we saw a dramatic increase in Hispanic turnout as well. Now, I don't think you've done an analysis on that, but I don't think it's that complicated for people to do what I've done. Take a look at what they've done in the past in city elections and take a look at what has occurred in November elections. One other point, if I could, to Councilwoman Stark. I like the idea of going out there and talking to the public, but I want to make sure that this all falls in line with either an August or a November election. What I don't want to do is have these hearings go on, and if that's okay, we're good on that. So one thing you may want to think about doing is combining them with some of the budget hearings, if it's workable to do that. That way it's in everybody's district. It's just something to think about as an alternative that's out there. Unless you want to go out and do your own too, that's great too. However we do that, I think it's fantastic. To get more public involvement is fine. I think that's all good, actually. I'm going to be strongly supporting this. I think it's time that the city of Phoenix get in line with everybody else. It's almost, when you think about this, it's almost like the cart and buggy days. Everybody's still clinging on to that cart and buggy, when in fact that everybody is looking at consolidating elections. It's fair to the public, it's fair for transparency, it's just the right thing to do to combine our elections, increase our turnout in the city of Phoenix, and get more people participating in electoral government. You know, if you were really looking at ways of suppressing votes, one of the things you would do is make it harder for people to vote. And having all these elections at all these different times makes it a lot more difficult for people to vote. So the more we start to consolidate, the more we start to look at ways of getting higher voter participation is the right thing to do in the city of Phoenix. I've been working on this since like the 1990s, and I'm glad we're at least moving in that direction in the city of Phoenix. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I have a quick question. Mr. Fontes, you were kind enough to show up here. How much will you charge the city of Phoenix for these elections?
And make sure this is on the record.
And the rumor mill is the price of elections may be going up in the near future. So impart some wisdom on us.
Beginner's fee.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for your gracious invitation and your incredibly inconvenient question. We don't know. The county has been charging jurisdictions around Maricopa County $2.12 per ballot by mail ballot for the better part of the last 12 years. We have not had a cost increase. We've spoken with all of our municipalities, school districts, water districts, sanitation and fire districts, et cetera, and have indicated that we are moving forward with a model. The numbers, you're very capable, very talented, and dare I say, one of among very many great city clerks in Maricopa County, has come to you with our not unreasonable estimates, but we don't have real models yet. So I can't answer that question specifically. Although I will say that there's a lot more, and with all respect, there's a lot more work I think that needs to be done. I think there are enormous numbers of options that I think still have yet to remain, that are unexplored in this realm. Having just come from the election center in San Antonio, we do know that there are lots of municipalities using ranked choice voting, which reduces the amount of negative campaigning and does increase voter turnout. It's also wildly popular in Minneapolis. They've got over 90% approval of ranked choice voting methodologies. The state of Maine has adopted ranked choice voting statewide. And so just with that little nugget that I put out there, my recommendation, if I could be so bold without having been asked, is that there's a whole host of, there are hundreds of other options out there that I think should be looked at with a voting district as large as the city of Phoenix, and making the size of changes that are necessary for a variety of different reasons. I think a really solid look at a lot of that research is important, and I don't know that that direction was given to your very able city clerk. So perhaps some of that would be necessary.
Thank you very much. I have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
You've indicated in elections that you will oversee, not ones that are aligned with state, but school district bond elections, et cetera, all mail elections. Can you tell us your thought process on that?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, a very brief historical context. I campaigned against ballot by mail because I didn't know any better. And when I came to the office, I looked at the data and I realized that not only was it better for voters, but it was better for administration of the election, it was better for security, it was better for election integrity. And so in studying that and speaking to the experts, not only here in Maricopa County, but around the nation, and we've done a lot of traveling and learning. My vertical learning curve over the years put us there. We know that moving to a ballot by mail model is better. It's just better. That's where the rest of the nation is moving towards. And so as an election services provider, the Maricopa County Elections Department has chosen, instead of offering what used to be options in precinct-based elections and ballot by mail, and having mixed elections with mixed logistics and different ways of conducting elections, that as an election provider for jurisdictions, not unlike the city of Phoenix, if that was to happen, we would provide that one option. And there are other private options out there, but they run somewhere between 6 and 10 times more than the costs of going through Maricopa County.
And one other question, and it has to do with ranked choice, that issue you brought up. I mean, theoretically, and that's not part of the motion currently, but if we were to explore that and decide to go in that direction, is it realistically possible to have, you know, if we have a November election where the city of Phoenix election, our items on the ballot would be at the very bottom and not have ranked choice for state elections or for state legislative elections, but then at the bottom of the ballot have ranked choice? What's your thought, your initial thought? Is that reasonably possible to have ranked choice for just city where the rest of the ballot would not be ranked choice?
It's not technologically possible at this time, Mr. Mayor. You do have a robust and independent elections department that might have to reconfigure a bit, but given the way things are moving in the elections world across the nation, that is something that is happening, and so certainly does bear out more study. But Maricopa County and the city of Phoenix really act as redundancies for one another, and so it's a really important part of the way that we act and interact. If there are any catastrophic problems at the election center over for us in Maricopa County, we would lean on our partners here at the city of Phoenix and vice versa. So really the idea of that redundancy is an integral part of elections here in Maricopa County in central Arizona.
That's hugely helpful. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Fontes, Recorder Fontes? Councilman Stark, please.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Certainly.
I have a brother that lives in Oregon, and they do everything by mail, and it's worked out. He said he's noticed a great return rate and a higher turnout of vote. So I am still willing to look at that as well. I think it's worthy, and I mean, he loves it, but it really has helped the state of Oregon.
I think Councilman Valenzuela is next, but it's up to you whether you want to have Vice Mayor go first or second. So, Vice Mayor.
Not going to get in Laura's way ever. So.
Please don't, because you'll watch out. I'm going to the discussion that we just had. Is it possible then to look at different models or look at ranked choice voting and then really have a dialogue with our community on the different types of options? I don't know if you put that in the motion or what we do, but I would like to look at different models too. I mean, I would like, if we're going to modernize ourselves, we might as well modernize ourselves and look at national models.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, we'd be happy to look at those. We have done some of that. My concern would be doing all of that in the time frame that we have. I don't know that that's something that we could achieve in that time frame.
But it's probably worth still starting the dialogue.
Yeah.
We can certainly provide some information about those and what they would entail and how it would affect it, but the full analysis and all, I'm not sure we could complete in that time.
Maybe the idea would be if we're going to take these out to the budget hearings and have a discussion about city election consolidation possibilities, that we at least talk about the concept of ranked choice and see what the citizens say about it as an option they like or not like. And I know we've got to do that post haste if we're going to do it, or we could always add that on at a later time as well. I mean, we could always do ranked choice later.
Mayor, may I ask a question on that too?
Councilman DeCiccio? Well, first off, wait, on that, to that point? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Councilman DeCiccio, to that point.
Over 70% of our elections are basically handled in one election cycle, or one election. How do you do ranked choice on just something like that? How would you, I mean, I'm kind of curious how you would do that.
Well, there's only two candidates, it's not ranked choice, it's ranked choice would occur when there would be multiple, more than two candidates, yeah.
No, I just want to make sure I just have that basically on the table and on the record, because 70% of our elections are handled in one election, period. So if you're looking at a ranked choice, I don't know how that works with something like that, but.
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, the ranked choice would affect the 30% that are not decided in one election, and you would reallocate the votes to the second or third. You remove candidates from the bottom of the ballot and reattribute those votes to other second choices and third choices, so that basically each voter is ranking the candidates in their priority order. You count the ballots the first time, and then for the one that get the least votes, you reallocate the ballots the votes from those ballots that voted for that candidate to other candidates in their second choice, so that you end up with someone receiving a majority in the first election.
Well, I'm not trying to get a debate on ranked choice. I figured out what it was, looked it up just now, so thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I think it's a request for a friendly amendment that we would at least have them do as much analysis as they could in the short run. If we can't get it done in time for a vote, we could always take that information, particularly add it on at a later time in another election, yeah. But it's something we ought to be looking at. Vice Mayor.
I just think it's very important since we're going to go talk to the communities. I find that if we're going to rush through this or move this quickly, I believe voters should have options and be able to discuss different options.
Councilman Valenzuela, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, the Vice Mayor just was going to make the first point I was going to make. We don't have to rush through this. You know, I don't think this is something that we need to do right now, and let's exclude the idea of going out and talking to the public because we don't have time to do it. We have to get this on the ballot. I mean, that's not where this discussion needs to be. I think it's wrong, actually, to rush this. I think what I appreciate is everyone up here unanimously is talking about turnout. You know, I've committed the way I get elected through turnout. When I first ran in 2011, it was, I believe, the lowest voting district of the 8 districts in the city. And no longer is. The overall voter turnout more than doubled in one election cycle. The Latino voter turnout increased by 488%. That's a lot of hard work that's knocking on everyone's doors. And there are 52 languages spoken in the district. There's a lot of work, a lot of hard work being done, bringing people out. So yes, it is about turnout. I believe very much about voter turnout. And if we are just going to base action on the amount of turnout, then, excuse me, then I guess the rest of this conversation makes sense to me. I get the first time I think this came up, the cost was the issue, right? So it's cost, it's turnout, but what no one is talking about yet, well, I'll continue to talk about this, it's access. It's access. And Phoenix, and the way we run our elections, you know, we should all be very proud of how we do it here. You can go to a ballot if you'd like. You can get on the permanent early voting list if you'd like and have a ballot mailed to you. You can vote over a 3 different days. You can actually come in, drop your ballot off, or vote the Saturday prior to the election, the Monday prior, and of course, Tuesday, Election Day. And we have universal polling places. So you don't have to go to the polling place by your home or your office or your kid's school. Go to any one of our polling places, and that number continues to expand here. These are points that are important to helping to bring out turnout. It's access. So do we focus on just the turnout? And even if it takes away from access? I guess we can, but I think that in full transparency, that's the discussion that has to be had. I think there still is a very real question about what happens if we do consolidate these elections. Does everyone up here get an extra year on their term? Is that an entirely separate conversation? I think it should be. After all, we are a city that prides itself on transparency. Everyone up here has talked about transparency. People are watching live right now online or on television because we believe in transparency. So let's vet it. Let's have a conversation. Let's go out to the community. This is worth having forums. And all of these things should be talked about. We have 150,000 independent voters out there. It's the largest and fastest growing demographic we have in terms of party affiliation. So if we consolidate these elections, independent voters who are on the PEVL, or the permanent early voting list, will not automatically get their ballot the way they do today. They would actually have to request a ballot, which is what independent voters have to do right now in primary races and statewide races, federal races. But they don't have to do that with city elections. They don't have to do that when you vote on who your council member will be or who your mayor will be, because the city of Phoenix has taken several steps forward, because we pride ourselves on access. But if we consolidate these elections, well, and if we go to the August, November time frame, then sure, in August, you're going to get a lot of people. Again, the largest and fastest growing demographic in terms of party affiliation, they will have one extra step, something that their neighbors who may be Democrats or Republicans do not have to do if they're on that PEVL list. They actually have to request a ballot. And then that independent voter, and I have a lot of friends, a lot of neighbors, a lot of family members who are independents. There's a reason they're independent. Now they actually have to call and ask for a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot. Now, if we move this, another option, because we want to protect the independent voters, why don't we go ahead and move this to November and March? Still doesn't fix the problem. It may minimize it a bit. I mean, come November, everyone gets a ballot. But what about March? You know, in the past 20 years, I believe there's only been one mayoral race, if I'm not mistaken, that has gone to a runoff. That doesn't mean the next one won't go to a runoff or the one after that. The problem isn't fixed. So we have turnout, we have cost, and we have access. I guess the real question is, how do we value those things? And what is the priority here with the city of Phoenix? As far as I'm concerned, access is the priority. Access is the priority. And this is not access. Not when you are forcing any voter from taking one extra step that their neighbors don't have to take. So I strongly oppose this. I think this moves us a step closer to becoming a partisan city. We should be priding ourselves on being this non-partisan city. You know, the way we take care of our libraries, our parks, public safety, you know, there's no Democrat way or Republican way. What we do here in local government is we actually work. And it's actually hard work. It's hard work to be in local government. You have to be a problem solver. And if you're good at it, then you pride yourself in extracting the politics out of it, out of the problem as much as you can, so that you can bring everyone to the table, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats or whatever the case might be, to actually solve something, actually move a community forward. We start move our elections from odd years to even years, and now we're on the same page as actual partisan candidates. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine going to your mailbox and you see, you know, vote all red, vote all slate candidates all red or all blue, and this council member? You know, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're a nonpartisan body. We've done very well in how we provide access to voters, and this is not moving us forward as far as I'm concerned. Now, when we can actually fix the independent problem, not minimize it, Not minimize it by moving from August, November to November, March. When we can actually fix that issue, then maybe we should be having this conversation. But we're talking about moving this thing forward without even fully vetting it in the community. You know, I mean, I don't agree with that. So I strongly oppose these changes.
Thank you very much, Councilman Valenzuela.
Mayor?
Chris, I had a chance to talk maybe about how the independent voters would be, how they operate differently under the various proposals. Please.
Mayor, members of the council, the issue with the independent is combining the nonpartisan issues and races onto a partisan ballot. The permanent early voting list issue exists in the primary partisan elections because of the open primary. The individuals who are registered independent or not one of the parties cannot automatically receive a ballot because they haven't identified which party they need to receive. As Councilman Valenzuela described, they have to take the extra step to identify what ballot they want to receive. So any election that has partisan offices on it, that becomes an issue. If we had an election in March and there was some partisan school district or some other election on there, we'd still have the same issue. But that doesn't typically happen because there's consolidation for most of the offices. In a general election, and when there's not a partisan primary on the ballot, then everybody gets a ballot that has both the partisan and the nonpartisan characteristics candidates on the ballot. So it's the issue of them not getting the ballot does not exist. The issues about the connections to partisan candidates and so on still would potentially exist.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Fontes, you just sat down, and I thought of a good question for you. Darn it. I apologize. I had a quick question for Mr. Fontes, unless you want to follow up.
These boots are made for walking, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor,
Councilman
just
Valenzuela
really,
first, go
really
ahead.
quickly, I just want to say, Adrian, Mr. Fontes, you're doing a great job. I voted on election day, and I decided, because some people want to mail their ballot in early, but I actually voted on election day, and I had my ballot printed at one of the new kiosks that you have, that's Access, that's moving us forward, and I just want to commend you for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So here's my question. City of Phoenix decides to move our elections to November of the even-numbered years. And normally, it's people on the Pebble, right, who get early ballots? Who gets early ballots mailed to them under the current system?
Mr. Mayor, in November or in August?
November.
In
People
November.
on the Pebble or others?
Anyone on the permanent early vote list
Yeah.
under current state law will get their ballot mailed to them in general election years, in elections that are administered countywide, or, for example, if there's a federal rules election like the congressional special that we just had. Only permanent early vote list voters will get those ballots. Now, jurisdictions in off-year elections can choose to have their election ballot by mail, and we had 26 or 27 jurisdictions just do that this past fall.
If the city of Phoenix, theoretically, goes to a November even number year, and we really want to increase voter turnout among city voters during that time, could we pay to have the ballot, the full ballot, which would include city elections, mailed to every registered voter in the city of Phoenix?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council,
We want to be fully represented as a city. We want to have our say. And so we're willing to invest to increase voter turnout.
I can't tell you that the city of Phoenix would be able to break their election for their city away from the rules that apply to state and federal candidates during a general election cycle. I can't tell you that they can or cannot.
That's an open question, at least.
It is an open question.
I mean, that would be a great way for the city. We really want to increase voter turnout, is to make an investment. We go to November election, and then we pay to send a ballot out to every single city of Phoenix voter. That would increase voter turnout, and we would have an increased say in county and statewide elections as a result, and we would invest in democracy. I think it's a really good idea. Councilman Waring, please.
Before we leave this, so Are you talking about, I guess question for Mayor, are you talking about putting our ballots in their envelopes?
No, we will be on the county ballot. We're not.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, I got to
If
look.
we were to
Because I
adopt
had, so
the
just so you
motion
know.
that Councilwoman
Yes.
Stark is suggesting, which is that we do in fact consolidate, not in August, but in November, with runoffs in March. So we will be on, Mr. Fontes will be running our elections.
I was going to ask him another question.
But we decided we're willing to invest in increased voter turnout. So he only currently sends ballots out to people on the Pebble. We want more. We're willing to write a check to his office so that every single Phoenix registered voter gets a ballot. That would increase democracy a lot. And that's I think that's something we ought to really be thinking. Now, he said he's unclear about whether we can legally do it or not. That's an open question. But I think if we really want to increase democracy, which seems like a goal of everyone in this table, that would be a good investment by the city of Phoenix. Councilman
So
Melvin.
I'm still.
Oh, please.
I had questions to this direct point. So I guess I had talked to the county recorder's office this week about my interpretation is this very thing, trying to investigate the issue of the independents in the August election. Could we put our ballots, it costs us, Chris, check me if I'm wrong, about 30 cents a ballot. But if we buy more ballots, so if we did as the mayor said, everybody gets a ballot automatically and we're sending them out, then the price per ballot goes down. But I'll just use 30 cents for an example. So we're in for 30 cents for, I think we said 700,000 voters if we send it to everybody. My question was, could we put our ballots in their envelopes and then get them back? The answer I got was no. So we couldn't do it that way. I guess you could, if you were going to send ballots to everybody anyway, that would make sense. And then you could pay extra to send ballots to the people who aren't on the Pebble. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying, who aren't on the Pebble for the rest of the elections, the federal, the U.S. senators and the governor and president and all that stuff. I mean, if that's doable, I would have guessed, hearing what you were saying, no, based on the answer I got earlier, but I guess now you're talking about being on the ballot. I'm not sure how that would work if people...
Well, the motion right now is to explore consolidating our elections, not for August, but in November with a March runoff. What was added to that was an exploration about ranked choice in November. If we decided to go with ranked choice, it would obviate that we wouldn't have the need for a March runoff. And what I'm suggesting, we don't even make that policy choice now, but my point would be is legally, if we could, if we do add our ballot to, or we have Mr. Fontes run our ballots, the question is whether we as a policy matter, if we decide we have the budget capacity to do it, we could mail the full ballot, including the Phoenix one, to every single Phoenix voter. And Phoenix would therefore increase voter turnout and be overrepresented in statewide and other county elections. And that's something I think, if this motion passes, that's something we ought to really explore, because I know it's a priority for every single member of this council to increase voter turnout among Phoenix voters. All right, so we have the motion is on the table.
I'm good on that.
You're good on that.
Unless somebody else...
Councilman Oswald was next. I apologize.
I love the idea of increasing voter turnout by increasing access. And that's what that sounds like. But now that said, under that scenario, I just, let me put a placeholder there for just a moment.
Please.
Clearly, this is on the fly. So in a minute, we're gonna give staff
1990s.
direction to come back to have all this figured out, which I think there's something wrong with that, okay? But nonetheless, in theory, I love the idea of raising voter turnout by raising access. I love that. Under your scenario, are we still running our own elections, or are we handing this over to someone else to run?
I think that's what consolidated elections means, but go ahead.
But so we are no longer going to be in the election business then? Is that what's happening here? If we go under that, with that scenario?
Mayor, Councilmember Valenzuela, that has been my understanding, that if we're consolidating elections with the county, we're not just aligning them, we're conducting our own on the same day. We are turning our elections over to Maricopa County to conduct those elections. We will be on their ballot. They would print it. They would mail them out. to either just to the people or to all of the registered voters if they can. There's some logistical challenges to that, but it's probably worth looking
Mr. Fontes, you accept our generous offer.
Mr. Fontes,
Mr. Mayor and Council,
you have that.
I have to tell you, standing here, I got elected partially because we had some concerns about election security.
Okay.
And there's nothing more important than
What are we
that
talking
right
about?
now in our agenda. Unfortunately, I have to, and that having been said, I mentioned this a little while ago, and I will be a little bit more clear. If we consolidate and we don't have a redundant election department somewhere nearby, we have 1 point of vulnerability for our elections in Maricopa County.
Good point.
And so,
So-
if you're asking, I am a district member in Council District 4, I will say that I take great comfort in knowing that if there is a catastrophic event, we can lean on the election department for the city of Phoenix.
All right, that's a good point. So our priority is higher voter turnout, but stopping the Russians is even a higher priority.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Councilman.
great priority, and thank you. I'm glad you're here, and thank you for your input. So in this scenario, we have the county reporter here, weighing in. So incredibly valuable and timely for this discussion, and something that should not be ignored by anyone on this dais. So thank you for that. So, but going back to the second part to my question, if we are getting out of the election business, which you're hearing the county recorder say, we need redundancy, right? But if we get out of the election business, then what happens in March in cases of runoff elections here? And do those independent, do they get, if the election is handed over, does everyone get a ballot then? Or are we just minimizing the independent problem? And maybe the question, see, I'm looking at our clerk, and again, this is on the fly, and he's so another reason I think we need to take a breath here, but so you see where I'm going with this. If we do this August-November thing, then we have a big problem in terms of how we build out that access for independent voters. And if we go to November, March, did we solve the problem, or did
Yeah.
we minimize it a bit?
Mayor, Councilman Valenzuela, I was looking at the county recorder because he knows more about the county school board elections and so on than I do. I can answer the question, but then he can maybe follow up and clarify the piece that I can't answer. If it's a city election, we're having our ballot, you generally would mail the ballots to all of the people on the PVOL. The only way you would not do that is if that election was consolidated with the county and somebody was conducting a partisan primary election. I'm not sure that that's possible anymore with the consolidated elections, but the county recorder would know more whether that's a possibility. But the only election where the permanent early voting list independents do not get the ballot automatically is a partisan primary. And if there was a partisan primary on the March item, then some of those voters would not get the permanent early voting list. Say it was one school district in Phoenix, almost everybody would get the ballot, but not that one with the partisan primary election, I believe.
Mr. Fontes, any additional thoughts on that issue?
I didn't get it. Yeah, do we have?
Mr. Mayor
Fontes, do you have
and Councilman Valenzuela, I think there's a little bit of background information here that's missing from the discussion. Maricopa County runs elections 4 times every single year. We run March, May, and we run August, November. Every election takes about 6 months to plan and another month afterwards to fully execute. We're operating elections all the time. If the city of Phoenix came on as a client that we'd serve, we certainly would make every accommodation possible under the law. We don't control state law. We don't control federal law. And as you may know, we've had a little bit of dust up with DOJ after they gave us particular instructions. So we're here to help as much as possible. You have a very capable staff here, and I would trust them to advise me on just about any matter that had to do with these things. But there are lots of ways to, if you'll pardon the expression, skin this particular cat. And I think We certainly are very happy to work, as we have so much in the past with the City of Phoenix Elections Department, to make sure that we solve any problems that have come up. But so we're at your disposal.
Thank you very much. Councilman. Councilman DeCiccio, please.
As I put something in my mouth, of course, always fits that way. So I apologize to my children in particular for talking with my mouth full. Put some chips in my mouth. Do we have a redundant system, Chris?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, yes, as Recorder Fontes mentioned, we first of all have an off-site location with scanning equipment that if something happened to our location, we could theoretically do it ourselves at another off-site location. We have limited capacity there, but we could do it. Then we also have an agreement with Maricopa County, just as they have with us, that if we couldn't tabulate our ballots, there was some problem, then we would use their facilities and use their equipment to tabulate the ballots. That was one of the advantages of both of our jurisdictions, having acquired the same ballot tabulation system, so that we can have that redundancy, we can share equipment, and we have done that many times over the years. So we do have redundancy both internally to some extent and then with the backup from the county.
And so let me ask you this, and this includes also the mail-in ballots with the redundancy, correct, or not?
Yes, that's for counting processing all of the ballots.
So you're saying you do not have a redundancy? And you're not secure? I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, we do, and that's the City of Phoenix's election department.
Okay, so
it's the only department that's robust enough, and we certainly have, in our processes of reviewing, very carefully considered the addition of more redundancies. We've certainly done a lot of work in hardening our security shell overall, but it is not correct to say that we don't have redundancies in our system.
You are secure?
Certainly.
If we were to go through you?
Absolutely.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Well,
second, if I could, to say we're rushing this has been debated since the 1990s. So I don't know how you can rush something from the 1990s. We've been talking about consolidating of elections. I mean, you've got 81 cities. I think we had testimony already, 81 cities throughout the entire state of Arizona that have already done this. So I don't know. I mean, if you want to throw things out there, that's just the way it is. How many registered voters do we have in the city of Phoenix?
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, it's about 700,000. The county's been going through the purge of the voters from the last election and so on with updates and addresses, so it's been declining slightly like it does every election. We were up around 730, 740. Now we're down somewhere between 700 and 720.
So if we increase turnout from 70,000 voters, would that be about 140,000 more voters would be able to turn out if it's a 20% increase?
Roughly, yes.
About that much. That's on the low end of it. So that's 120,000 more voters would be turning out. I'd like to ask Mr. Fontes then too. During your elections, does everybody have access to a ballot?
Mayor, Councilman, I can't tell you absolutely that everyone does have access because we sometimes don't have communication with some of the folks that are on our voter rolls. Some folks have such a difficult time getting to the polls or understanding instructions that they are not having access. Now, we have done a whole lot of work to increase access and to improve that, but it would be foolish of me to sit here and say that we have 100% access. And if I could, I would like to correct something that I mentioned a moment ago, and that is under the current model.
They can do that, correct? I mean, every registered voter has the ability to vote. That's access, right? They have the ability to get to a polling place. They have the ability to get on the Pebble list. They have the ability to do that, correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, we'd like to think so.
Okay. And so from my end of it, again, if you want to look at outcomes-based models, which government doesn't do, I mean, look at this. We've been talking about this since the 1990s. Outcome-based models are based on what is the final outcome that you want to achieve. We've already got testimony here that we could increase our turnout on the minimum side of it by 140,000 more voters. So at the end of the day, we've had access. More people have now access because turnout tells you that access comes out. The turnout model comes out more. So that tells you right off the bat. So I don't understand this access and turnout being different because they're really the same. Because at the end of the day, you've got more people coming out, turning out, voting on these things. If you're looking to derail the idea of public involvement, and if you're looking to derail the fact of more public participation, more public voting, then this is the way to do that, create this level of confusion. This is a really simple thing. This is not complicated, nor is it brain science here. What we're talking about is making it easier for voters to vote in November elections, and if there's going to be a runoff, which is the other 30%, then that would be done in March. That's all we're talking about today, so let's not try to confuse things here. Let's not make it difficult. If you're opposed to it, then just say you're opposed to it, but at the end of the day, there's no reason for this level of confusion for a very simple concept that the majority of the state of Arizona has already adopted. 81 cities out of 90 have already adopted this. I think that they're doing it right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Valenzuela, I think it's to that point, and then we'll head to Councilman Warren, please.
To that point, what is also on record, and thank you, sir, for being so honest and for being here. My colleague makes it sound so simple. You know, it's that simple. 81 cities. You know, again, this is a step moving toward partisanship here in Phoenix. And what my colleague, the councilman, wanted on record is the county recorder saying that, yes, there is some security. Of course, he's done a good job. There is security there. But you have the county reporter coming before us with a great deal of integrity and humility, why don't we have the rest of that on record? You know, he's hearing some of this stuff, and he's looking over at the city clerk, but you know, I guess this is the guy who's been elected to do the job, and he's doing a good job, and this is the person we all, you know, actually the city manager put trust in to run elections for the city of Phoenix, but I guess, you know, we could just tell them that this is easy, it's gonna be fine, you know, it's pretty interesting how that works. I still stand in, opposed.
All right. Vice Mayor, was it to that point? Councilman Waring, please. To that point. Councilman Waring, go ahead, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you. All right, so the legislature just passed a bill in the House. It is the Speaker's bill. Chris, I think I just gave you a copy, so you have that now. Fresh news, hot off the presses. When this came up, this is not my motion. This isn't, frankly, my preference. I do think in terms of voter suppression, the biggest thing that suppresses voter turnout is the current system. The charts Chris showed proved it. If we make a change, turnout's going to go up just by virtue of the fact that we're not doing the silly stuff we're doing right this second. So in any case, the legislature, though, is trying to address the issue of the independents, and I think they did an amendment, and they also did the expenditure limitation, correct? There should be amendments by the Speaker, and that's code at the legislature for this sucker's probably going to pass. So, and it's probably going to pass in a month. I don't know if the governor will sign it. We'll find out. They are very aware of what's going on here. So I made them aware. They are willing to make more changes. I don't think that's me speaking out of turn as the Secretary of State, if it makes us more comfortable with things. I didn't necessarily anticipate November because I didn't know that's what the motion was going to be. But I do understand the thinking behind it. I asked for the research in an effort, I thought a good faith effort, to alleviate some of the concerns people had last time, because that should address, I mean, we talk a lot about independence and so forth. I think that kind of goes away with the November-March issue. That is not what the legislature is proposing, though, so I'm not sure how that works out legally if they pass their thing and our voters pass this. As far as it being Republican and Democrat, Chris, check me if I'm wrong. Didn't the chart you show us that Phoenix is 28% Republican and 34% Democrat, with the rest being independent? Wasn't that what you showed us?
We go back to that chart, please.
So I guess if anybody benefits, it should be Democrats. I'm not entirely sure how. Wait for him to call it up here. Okay, yeah, 30, there it is, 35 and, sorry, my eyes, 35 and 28, correct? So what I said was accurate. So it's more Democrat than Republican, so it's not some Republican plot. I know it sounds silly. I actually would like to see more turnout, which will happen just by virtue of the fact of changing it from what we're doing now. Always had an issue with this. This is not something new for me. I did a bill in the legislature 10 years ago or more. I can't even remember what year it was, probably 2007, on this issue. Amazingly, cities that you've heard of, like Chandler and Scottsdale, they switched. Was there rioting in the streets, crisis? No, they just switched. They all made it work somehow. We, of course, can't do it. They claim they saved money. They claim their turnout went up. We're claiming it won't be like that. Well, maybe not, the way we run things, who knows? So I guess I would just say I'm sort of amused by the discussion. I understand the issue for the August election, and I assume that's why, like I said, I didn't find out what the motion was going to be until about a minute before this meeting from the maker of the motion. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying. No, I know. I'm just saying. So, so my understanding, Chris, is that 30% of the independents in August go to the polls and vote. Is that a fair? That's why I remember you telling me. I don't want to be misremembering.
Councilman, Mayor, Councilman Waring, I don't believe I have the numbers of what percentage go to the polls. We were talking about what percentage, I had numbers on what percentage return the ballots, or return the request to get ballots, but I don't believe I have anything that shows what percentage of the independents go to the polls.
Okay, what was the chart that showed 15% pick? Do you know what I'm talking about now? Okay, so 15% and then 18% one of the other years picked a ballot for Republican or Democrat. So those 15 or 18% are covered. They're getting a ballot, and they've kind of picked a side. I thought there was something on there, another 30% were going to the polls. When you go to the polls in August, you have to pick one or the other. So they're picking. So that's almost, 30 plus 15. So now we're talking about 55% of the independents then would be at issue of not getting a ballot. I believe the legislative bill that you've got in front of you addresses that 55% of the independents. The Republicans and Democrats are either picking to get a ballot by mail or they're going to the polls, where they would find us and our smiling faces on there without an RRD next door name.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, I do not have any numbers on what percentage of the independents
that's
are
fine.
going to the polls. My numbers were on how many of them were had requested the ballot, and that was the 20%.
Okay, I'll look back to my notes.
I just haven't looked at that particular number.
Okay. Important to remember, though, talk about turnout. Pretty much every model, from all-you-can-eat mail ballots to everything else, it's going to go up. If you want to suppress the vote, keep doing what you're doing. So I applaud the maker of the motion for doing something about it and the people who seconded it and so forth. I do think the legislature might take matters into its own hands. People don't like when that happens, but doesn't make it any less of a reality. In 1996, that happened. So Phoenix's charter says very clearly, we're going to do our elections in, wait for it, October and right after Thanksgiving. Chris, do we do our elections in October and right after Thanksgiving? No. I'll answer for you. So we haven't for a long time. I think the legislature passed a bill saying that's kind of silly. I don't even know how they came up with fourth Tuesday in November, so like right after the football games and everything. I'm sure participation was just gangbusters then. I'm sure lots of people were paying attention during the Christmas season. So the legislature said, we're not going to let that stand. And so they changed it, correct? City sued to try to keep the system it had, and it lost, and it changed. I assume at that point it must have changed the terms. It didn't change the charter. We're talking about all these charter changes now, but it didn't do that then. It just complied with the state law. Is that a kind of a factual analysis of what happened 20 years ago plus?
Mayor, Councilmember Waring, there was a bill passed in 1996 that limited elections to 4 dates a year. The primary target of that bill was school districts and the special elections for all the special taxing districts and the school districts, but cities and towns were part of that.
Cities.
The city of Phoenix decided not to challenge that bill. Phoenix did not challenge it. The city of Tucson did, and the city of Tucson lost that challenge. Phoenix complied, voluntarily moved its elections from the charter dates to the consolidated dates.
Did not change the charter. Somehow, by some miracle, They were able to not change the charter, but change the election dates.
Mayor, Councilman Waring,
I mean,
the charter was preempted by state law and in a court case saying that the legislature had the authority to do that.
okay, so,
Jim, I worked that bill.
so
That
let
was
me
my
ask
bill.
this, I guess I'll ask this way. So if this bill passes, it's going through the legislature right now. It should address the issue for the independents. It addresses expenditure limitations. Is the city just going to comply? Who makes that decision? It's done it before. Didn't even have to change the charter, just complied.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, defer to the law department, but if the legislature passes a bill that would affect us and cause us to move our elections, the council would be able to make the decision whether to challenge that or whether to comply. And then our charter provisions would be preempted, presumably by that legislation. And so whether we put that on the ballot to change it and whether the voters approve it or not, it really becomes irrelevant, because if we're bound by the court decision and the state legislation, then we have to change,
So we have to
regardless
change
of what our charter
regardless.
says.
Even if voters said something different, we'd still have to change. All right, so part of the reason I'm taking us down this fun trip down memory lane, or ancient history lane, I guess, really, this isn't a new issue. For the people who are claiming this is something that just popped up out of nowhere, so there was an issue, I think Phoenix changed its elections in 1989, if I remember right. Thelda would remember better than me. 1996. In 2012, I think there was also something in 2007, and I forgot what it is. Bad on me, because I was in the legislature then. Then there was 2012. City fought it in court. So I would say in terms of citizen participation, there's been a lot. Bills in the legislature, court actions, undoubtedly front page stories, etc. This isn't new news. It's been several months since Mr. Huey came down here with his letter. 3 months? And in all this time, nobody thought all these questions that we're thinking about today. If you want to put it on the August ballot, and so you mentioned the issue. If you want to stall and get rid of it, keep doing what you're doing. If you want to actually have either a vote or a sensible discussion, that's a different story. And here's the thing. The last budget hearing is the 17th. Our last meeting before the April 30th deadline to get on the August ballot would be April 18th. So I don't know how much input from the meeting of the 17th would be on the 18th and so forth. We're only talking about a month now. The idea that we're doing on some fly is a little silly, given that this has happened before. It's been foisted on the city, and the city just complied. And frankly, the other cities, to Sal's point, just complied. Somehow, they made it work. And I don't remember a big hue and cry. I don't remember them sweating it. I know lots of elected officials around lots of municipalities in Arizona, and I don't remember any of them saying, oh, God, we got to deal with this. It's really hard. Don't remember that conversation, not even one. I sponsored the bill, and I wasn't talking about my bill when I remember it. There was another bill, I can't remember exactly what it was about, that I think Phoenix also took to court. But my bill, complaints? Not one. Independents not being able to vote? Not one. The other cities have been doing this already. But we're saying we can't. If you don't want to, Sal's right, just vote no. And again, this isn't my ideal motion, so I'm not even defending something that I'm all that excited about, except the stats were irrefutable. The turnout will go up. The other cities claim they save money, so I'm not sure why we're not going to, but okay. I think I did what I could talking to the county recorder's office and the legislature to make this as workable as possible, whether it be in time for our new brethren, if people resign. To that end, I will make this point. We'll just say, if Mayor X was mayor in 2018 and decided to resign before I think it's April 20th, thus triggering an August election, what would happen to the independents then? We have two choices. Maybe you can highlight what those are. I hadn't thought to ask this question. This is a reporter's question, actually. Thank you, Jessica from the Republic, for making me ask.
Mayor, Councilmember DeCiccio, if we have a mayor's election or a candidate election on the August primary ballot, the independents will not get the ballot automatically if the county conducts the election.
So we're complaining right now about the evils of this new system we're proposing. But right now, today, if that happens, I'm not saying it's going to, I don't know when Greg's going to resign, but But if that happened, right now, independents wouldn't get the ballot for our thing for mayor right now. Legislature's trying to fix that, but okay. The other way we could do it is we could have a whole separate system of elections for people who like redundancy. That's a fabulous idea, because we'll have 2 different polling places, just like in a school board election. When I was on the ballot, I think it was in 2013, and I got my ballots, and even I didn't realize I had to go to 2 different polling places. That wasn't a particularly well thought out plan in the eyes of constituents, and people forget, I'm actually a constituent of me too. I was just as aggravated as everybody else. That's not a good workable system, but that's what we'd be doing. Or the independents would get the ballot, one of those 2, under our current system, the way we're doing it right now. Okay? So that's an interesting conundrum for those who are defending really the status quo, because that's really what we're talking about. So I guess maybe changing some stuff might be a good idea. I think whether I agree completely with it or not, this is not the final vote, so I haven't decided what I would do, push comes to shove. But I do think Deborah made a well-intentioned motion that addressed some of the concerns that people had. It might not be ideal, it may not even comply with state law when this all gets sorted out, but that's unknowable at this point. But I definitely get the sense the idea is to drag this out. There are 10 potential items for ballots, 6 on this and then 4 others. If you don't make the August ballot, it's not like there's a big rush to do it, but if you don't do it in August, there's probably not gonna be enough space in November, and so then it gets pushed into probably oblivion, which is fine if that's the goal. Remember, the goal produces the same status quo we're railing against: lower turnout and aggrieved independence. I'm not saying that lightly, it's just, I understand their point of view, and that's why I supported Deborah and tried to find mechanisms myself to address that. And we're still working through that, so that may have already be in the works and be happening. So just want to give my 2 cents worth on this issue. I've been working on it a long time. It's new news to me that this is a new issue, because it's not. It's a very old issue that's been percolating for a long time, and Phoenix has mishandled it badly. That is not a reflection on the clerk's office, but Phoenix has done everything it can by keeping the status quo to suppress turnout. Any conversation up here to the contrary, it's just noise.
Councilman
Look
Williams?
at the data.
I just have a couple questions. Why was Deborah's election on the county ballot?
Mayor, Councilman Williams, the timing when that vacancy occurred to run in the August election, by the time the vacancy occurred, the earliest date that the charter required a special election, and the next date that it could be held was the November election. Then we were faced with the situation, or the council was faced with the situation that Councilman Waring just described, of we could hold a separate election and have people go 2 places and have 2 ballots, or we could place the item on the race on the county ballot. And the council selected to put it on the county ballot in November. It couldn't go on August because it was too late. November was the soonest that it could be put on.
So technically, we could change from November to March and you still operate the election. That one's on the record.
Mayor, Councilman Williams, are you saying?
The city could hold an election separately, not run by the county, on those dates?
In theory, yes, we could still conduct elections. The challenge becomes if we're not conducting the regular elections and we're only conducting special elections, and when those occur, then we're maintaining the equipment and the staff, and it's difficult to maintain the expertise and the skills of the staff and the temporary employees and so on that we need to be able to do that. So trying to maintain it if we're not conducting all of the elections is challenging and not as cost effective.
But I just heard the county say they were dependent on you for the backup. And if you have none of that in place, how does that occur?
That would be a question, I guess, for Recorder Fontes, but if we were not their backup, they would.
He was smart.
State law requires jurisdictions to have a backup for elections. So they would either have to develop their own capability in another location or try to contact with another county. But as he mentioned, and as I talked about, Phoenix is by far the 2nd largest jurisdiction in the state. We're larger than Pima County. So there are limited resources for the county to go to within the state for backup. Not that it couldn't be done, but there aren't a whole lot of options available to them.
I don't want to put him on the spot, but I'm real curious on how quickly that could be done. If this all went through, it sounds like you would be out of the business totally, and the staff would be moved on to other places. So I'm concerned about that. I know you said earlier that you could do a ballot and it could be mailed with the county's ballot in the same envelope, right? And that would still have you operating at least partial of the city election. Did I hear you say that earlier? No?
Mayor, Councilman Williams, no, that, there was discussion about that, but I believe the county's information to me, and I don't know if Recorder Fontes has any different response, but that is challenging from the county's perspective to do. They did not agree to, if we printed a ballot, put it in their envelope. They said they would try to work with us and do the best that they can to provide services, but that does affect the integrity of their election and how they conduct it, and the security of the system that they use in ensuring that the right ballot got provided to every voter and that only one ballot got in the envelope, the system that they have in place. That creates some issues. Even a bigger challenge is how you mail the ballots back. If they came back to them, the verification process and all that is,
No, that'd be a big problem. I
almost
can
impossible
understand
to do. A separate envelope would be almost the way to do it, but you'd still have issues with them putting them in the wrong one, putting the ballots in the wrong envelope, mailing it back to the wrong jurisdiction. And I'm not sure that if we were going to do that and have the separate ballot coming to us, that it wouldn't be more efficient to just mail the voters separately, mail the two ballots. I mean, I have not done all the numbers on that.
Has Mr. Meyer correctly described your concerns about a jointly mailed city and county ballots to people?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that's a novel but an incredibly bad idea.
Hey.
In all candor and with all due respect, it lends an enormous amount of confusion to the voters, and that's our first primary concern. It also would require a whole separate set of instructions, which we continuously tweak whenever any issues come up. Also on the back end, the question of collecting, separating, signature verification, it all becomes very confusing, and it certainly would increase our processing costs on the back end. Could it be done? Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
But should it be done? I will happily stand here arm in arm with your clerk and say no.
Okay. And then my last question, Mayor,
Please.
is what's going on at the legislature? I haven't heard, seen, or know what they're doing about this election.
Okay, well,
Buddy, tell
Councilman
me
Waring
what's-
has suggested that the speaker has a bill that is, I guess, an attempt to deal with this vexing issue that if we were to have nonpartisan city elections coinciding with the August election, it would force voters to pick a Democrat or Republican ballot. We've seen from the numbers that there's a huge drop-off under the circumstances. I think Councilman Waring was suggesting that there was an attempt at, I don't even say a legislative fix, but I guess a legislative improvement to that, but I don't know what that legislative improvement is proposed to be. And I think that's in part why the motion by Councilwoman Stark was to avoid that issue altogether by not having our elections and August elections together, but avoid it when there would be a single ballot in November, so therefore we could potentially attach our elections to a November ballot where you wouldn't have to ask our independents to pick one or the other.
Right,
Frank?
and that's why I was supporting that, but.
So the bill as amended today addresses the independent voter issue strictly by putting it on the November ballot. Yeah, correct?
We know the answer, right? If we don't, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the attempt was somehow to, and there's no way to fix it, but is there a way to sort of improve the dilemma for independents who would have to choose a partisan ballot in the August election?
Well, we're looking at House Bill 2604. In the amendment that the speaker offered today, it didn't address the independent voters directly. It
Councilman, you had suggested that they were coming up with a fix, and so we are now trying to clarify that. Councilman Williams has asked for clarification. What is that attempted fix? I don't want to mischaracterize, but
it's fair.
Well, I can read the summary of the bill. I have that for you if you like that. So it requires that political subdivisions hold elections on statewide election dates if there is a significant decrease in voter turnout during specified non-consolidated elections. So at least 25% lower than the lesser of the turnout in the jurisdiction during either of the previous 2 statewide elections of the same type. So if there's a 25% decrease, then you'd be required to move to the November cycle. It removes the language in the bill that requires consolidated elections if turnout in a political subdivision is less than 75% of the average statewide turnout in either of the 2 preceding statewide elections of the same type. It specifies that a municipality must hold its elections on statewide election dates beginning 3 years after the occurrence of the significant decrease in turnout. So after the 2 cycles, you can do it in 3 years. Permits a municipality to extend, it directly addresses the terms issue, so it permits a municipality to extend the terms of office for elected officials to comply with the consolidated elections requirements, so it directly addresses that. It exempts municipalities from excess expenditure penalties if their alternative expenditure limitation is scheduled to expire following an election consolidation. And the municipality seeks voter approval at a specified upcoming election, and certain criteria are met depending on the date the limit will expire. So it addresses the expenditure issue, and it defines political subdivision, significant decrease in voter turnout, and statewide election date and voter turnout. That was the amendment today offered by the speaker.
all right, thank you very much. At a previous meeting, it was suggested that Secretary Reagan was going to somehow fix this problem. She was not able, obviously, to come up with the solution to the issue of independent voters and the partisan primaries. It appears, and Council, I know you wouldn't do it purposely, but it sounds like maybe. I thought they did. Yeah, so apparently the speaker tried to fix it, but maybe, or I don't know, but we tried, but at least they were not able to come up with a legislative fix. So this is a dilemma. But
this was the amendment offered and passed on the floor.
So Council, I think that's the reason why Councilwoman Stark suggested we not have our city elections on the August elections, but instead look to November if we're going to consolidate. So that way we don't have the independent disenfranchisement issue. I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think it was the reason why and that's why the motion was seconded. Okay, Councilman Valenzuela, please.
But we will in runoff elections, it sounds like. Maybe not in November, but in March, unless we inform, because that's basically what we'll be doing, inform our city clerk and, of course, Mr. Fontes, that we plan on turning over our elections to you, sir, but we're going to go ahead and continue to fund our own operation to be sure that people in March, independents in March, will get their early ballot. So I don't believe we are here yet to have this conversation. And yes, this has been discussed for many years. For many years. At the legislature, this has been discussed. They've been trying to get their hands on our elections and the way we do things for many years. In fact, another bill introduced. It's not even the first one introduced this session. Trying to turn our elections into partisan elections. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and sit back and let the legislature at it? That's not a good idea. So what I am hoping for, and I'm not going to support this motion with all due respect to my colleagues who I have a great deal of respect for in Deborah Stark and Delta Williams. I think two amazing people and leaders. I will be voting no on this. What I'm hoping is that the majority of this council votes no on this. And, you know, if we want to have the conversation, which we should always have a conversation about voter turnout and access, then let's do it right. We've had ad hoc committees here at the city from the council. Maybe we have an ad hoc on this. Perhaps we put this over into one of our subcommittees. Let's have a real conversation. Let's put it out into the community. If you really want to turn out more people by way of access, you know, why don't we just automatically allow everyone to be registered to vote? I mean, if that's really where we want to go. So I just think that we are not in a position to now give direction to our city staff to come back. And I don't know how anyone who's listened to this debate for the last probably, 2 hours or whatever, can feel confident that now we are going to go ahead. We have enough information to give to our city staff to then come back and talk about ballot language that will be voted on to actually put on a ballot. It's not a good idea.
Are you next? You want to speak?
No, I just want to respond to that.
Council Waring, please.
Thank you. So I owe you guys an apology. So they did do an amendment today about so the speaker has been out of town for 2 days. And so the staff made the decision to just go ahead and do the bill as it was with the expenditure limitation amendment. They have drafted so the way it would read, on the card where you pick Republican or Democrat, you can also pick, I want the nonpartisan, the way it will read is nonpartisan municipal ballot. So you're picking the ballot. There's no more, we're sending it to you forcefully and so forth. So you'll get your ballot if requested. Now we're going to make that amendment in the Senate. That's what's going to happen. If that's not enough, they are also willing to create a permanent early ballot list for the same for independents. So you'd be on the list and you get your ballot. You could go in and exchange that for a partisan ballot at the polls if you wanted to. And I think, Chris, you've told me you could, even at this point, if you got your ballot the way it was before, you could return it. You said something about, I think, 27 days, and then you could get the partisan ballot if that's what you wanted to do.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, if a voter receives a ballot, spoils it, damages it, I believe if they wanted to change and vote the party ballot instead of the municipal ballot, they can get a replacement ballot either by requesting it be mailed to them. The original ballot can be canceled and a new ballot can be issued. I'm not clear exactly how the county handles that, but I believe it's similar to what we do.
Okay. And you have my apologies, guys. I got a text saying the amendment passed, and I assumed that was the amendment. The bill did pass, and it took care of one of the issues. The other they're going to do in the Senate for the travel issues that I mentioned before. I apologize. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilman Stark, we've heard obviously today what I consider new information as it relates to security of our elections, the desire of both the city clerk as well as the county to make sure they have appropriate backup. So I don't know if you any desire to amend your own motion as it relates to ensuring the backup security item, and we'd have to work that out. We don't know what that answer would be, but we just have to work that out. Please.
I would agree. I think we need to look at it, but I still think we need to talk and move forward with some ballot language to look at how we would deal with the issue of voter turnout and doing a November election. But yeah, I think we need to add that. I'd be happy to do that. Looks like Chris has got a lot of work to do.
So the request is the request that you support examination of a November, a consolidation with a March runoff. As we talked about earlier, looking at ranked choice, so we investigate that, and ensuring that we would still have the appropriate backup, so we'd have ballot security as recommended by Recorder Fontes, which we may not be able to get to. I mean, that's what we're going to investigate. We may not be able to get there, but obviously everyone on this dais wants to ensure that we have appropriate ballot security. I don't think any of us were aware that the backup security for the county was the city. I'm glad that we do that, but I wasn't aware of that. Vice Mayor.
And what is the timeline, Chris? I guess that's where I'm like having some little nervous meltdowns because we gave you a point in time, and maybe we look at the date to be able to vet and get all the answers we need.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, the deadline that we'd be looking for an August ballot is that the council would have to refer the measures, and we have to notify the county that we were putting measures on their ballot by April 30th. It's 120 days before the election. We have a few days more than that to actually get them the final ballot language, about 2 weeks. But the idea to refer the measures and how many for the county would have to be done by April 30th. Whether that's done at a regular council meeting or a special meeting or whatever would be up to the council.
And for the November?
For the November, it's the same situation, but I believe the date is July 9th.
Okay, so the November ballot would provide us more time and to be able to look at it, get our questions answered, and then make a decision.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Pastor, that's correct. That, just to remind you, the issue with the November is the space on the ballot and whether there would be enough space to put all the measures that we need to.
And we would have to determine that. I just also want to get on the record. I believe there 70 cities had no choice but to consolidate. There are 19 that are under charter amendment, and because of their 19, then those cities decided that how they wanted to move in order to consolidate or not. Just want to get that on the record as to why there could be 80 or 88 or however many, but there were some cities that had no choice. The other thing is I actually enjoy sensible discussion. I enjoy having the dialogue of listening to everybody back and forth and understanding and thought process. What I don't enjoy is snarkiness. I don't enjoy lectures being given and a lot of other things because I think we've all were elected for a reason, and we all understand the pieces of the issue and have opinions about the dynamics that we're talking about. Some people think it's an old issue. It's not an old issue to me. It's a new issue, and I haven't been around this whole time in this whole city since 1990, so it means something to me, and my vote means something to me, and how it affects voters and how it affects people around. And so I'm just responding to some of the comments that were made. I think the other piece is to increase turnout is a result of increased access. It's not increased access itself. And so as people determine and say, oh, we're suppressing an access, I think the main key is we do want a higher voter turnout, but we also want those disenfranchised communities, such as independents, Latinos, a voting bloc that comes out to vote, to be able to have the access to vote. And I can tell you, I work really hard in the community to make sure that all those communities have access, so that they have the ability to vote. There are many different ways in order to do access: automatic voter registration, automatic early ballot mailing to all registered voters, and there are other ways. But to say that turnout and access are the same thing is naive and false. And we can debate about it if we like, it's okay. I don't believe the status quo suppresses turnout. You can do any number of things in order to get turnout in the odd number of years. Turnout will be increased. It's not when you hold an election, it's how that is determined that determines the turnout. So election, it doesn't matter where we hold it, it's how we go about and determine how we're gonna make the turnout come out. I think the option is giving people more chances to vote, and turnout increases no matter what. And it doesn't matter when you hold it. So if there's more options and more opportunities to people to go vote, I think that's where you would see the access and the turnout. So I don't think any of one of us argue that we don't want to see more voter turnout. It's just a matter of how we do it. Is it accessible to everybody? And what is our responsibility in order to increase that turnout? So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? So just as I understand the motion, it's to have the staff investigate and potentially come up with language that would have our elections go to November, the March runoff. Also to investigate ranked choice. If we decide to go in that direction of ranked choice, it would eliminate the need for a runoff in March, like they do in Minneapolis and a few other cities. And it ensures that we do have the backup security. I don't think anybody on this council, if it turns out that our city clerk and the county recorder can't determine a reasonable path to security of our ballot, we're probably not going to move forward with it. We'll stick with our current system. But I think it ensures that it still has appropriate ballot security. I would just add that I think that if we go in this direction and we can legally do it, what an opportunity for the city of Phoenix, again, to fund the mailing of ballots to every single registered voter, which would have the impact of significantly increasing voter turnout and giving Phoenix a disproportionate impact on statewide elections, which is great for the and other cities that have consolidated. They could do the same thing as well, and I'm going to recommend it to my municipal friends in other charter cities that have chosen to move in this direction, that if we go in this direction, let's really maximize voter turnout. So we ought to investigate what the cost would be on that, but we ought to make, if I'm going to be on this council when this ultimate vote is made, that certainly would be a value of mine. Councilwoman Gallego.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of my colleagues' commitment to getting as many Phoenicians as possible involved in our elections, and agree with Mayor Stanton, the more we can get people involved. So appreciate your leadership and great idea on that. I want to thank the county recorder for coming down. It has been a much stronger debate because you were involved in it and given us a lot of food for thought. Our decision is different from other cities. As you mentioned, we are the largest city. We're your most important partner on elections, and so we do have information that we need to consider that maybe other cities have not. There are actually, as the Vice Mayor pointed out, not as many cities have made this decision and switch, and we need to take it very seriously. We added more people than any other city in 2016, and when you're growing so incredibly quickly, things like home rule and expenditure limits are vital. We have to consider that we need to be able to continue to invest in public safety and in infrastructure, and so those details on expenditure limits are very important. So we have a lot of information to consider. I am planning to support Councilwoman Stark's motion. I still want to see the details, which are incredibly important to me, but I think more debate, more study is important here.
Mayor?
Councilman Nowakowski.
You know, Mayor, I've been on the council for over 10 years now, and I remember that every precinct when we first started had a polling place on election day. And then we went through that change where we created centers and we opened 3 days and had it at City Hall and all that, and I was against it. I was totally against it because I said exactly what I was hearing my colleagues talk about, that we have minorities that aren't going to be able to go to the polling places, et cetera, that people aren't going to be using these vote by mail, that it's not going to work. And, you know, but I listened, I debated, and now I agree that this early ballot, we're up to 94% or plus, right? And it's just incredible. It's incredible how technology and how voters think differently than 10 years ago, and now how people are thinking now. So I'm open to looking for new ideas. I'm looking at the best practices at the county and what our fellow county members are doing, and let's find out what the best practices are. And if it comes back that it's not something that fits in the city of Phoenix, then we can vote that down. But I think right now we really need to look at those individuals that have to go to two. The biggest complaint I get all the time is, why do I have to go to 2 polling places where I have to vote for school bond elections here and city elections over here? Things that we can combine, making it easier for individuals so they're not confused when election day comes, and those individuals that like to go to polling places are not pulled to different directions. Also, just to make sure that it's easier. And I think that sometimes politicians, we get up here and we kind of talk and we lose focus of what the real conversation is about, is how to get people out to the voting places, how to get more voters involved, and how can people have a vested interest in their city of Phoenix. So hopefully with this process that you can come back with some good information, some good data, and I'm open. I'm going to keep my mind open this time and I'm not going to fight you all.
Councilman Valenzuela, please.
Thanks, Mayor. One thing I didn't hear the recap of the motion, or I don't know if it's in the motion, but the topic or the discussion on the extended terms, adding an extra year.
Yes, that was
Okay.
part. I'm
well,
sorry.
I don't think I heard the recap.
I'm glad you
Mayor, of
reminded
that.
us. Thank you.
And does this motion, I'm still not confident that we're protecting the independent voter in cases of a runoff election. I keep hearing, August, November. We're not talking about August, November. Now we're talking about November, March. I like the idea of every constituent in Phoenix being a voter. In fact, again, that's why I believe in access. But I don't hear anything in this motion that assures an early ballot for everyone who wishes to receive one. Independents in March as well. Is that part of the motion? Is that what I'm hearing?
Okay, I have a quick question. Maybe, Chris, you could explain, how would independents be treated in a runoff election in March, which obviously would only have city stuff on it? Would independent voters be treated like they currently are in city elections, or are they treated differently? Please.
Mayor, members of the council, in a March runoff election, if the ballot was just city or the city items, all of the voters, including the independents, would get a ballot. The only part of the voters on the people list that would not get one in a March election would be if there was a partisan primary election going on at the same time in part of the city. Then I believe we have the same issue with what ballot do you mail them. I do not believe that is a common occurrence. I don't know whether it can happen at all. I'm not as familiar with what the county does and what elections for school districts are still conducted at this point in March.
Yeah, in normal circumstances, the runoff would just be a city election in March, if there was a runoff.
If the city was running the election itself in March, then everyone would get the ballot.
However, the city is not. If we're talking about giving the elections to the county, then we're mixing messages here. Then the city is not. This is how it currently is happening with the city. But this motion is telling staff not to bring back research. I mean, keeping an open mind is a good thing. Hoping that staff comes back with information. We're not asking staff to go. We're asking staff to draw up language to put on the ballot, which essentially is going to move our elections to the county regardless of what staff brings forth. So the way we handle independent voters in March is not. It doesn't sound like it is going to be the same as what the city clerk just talked about.
Sorry, the question is not, the question would be, would independent voters be treated differently than members of political parties in a March election in which only city items are on the ballot? I'm guessing whether it's the city or the county that would run the election, independent voters would not be treated differently than members of political parties for purposes of receiving ballots, where they would be in August.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think I'll take that one. It is entirely possible. We have an example very recently of special election being declared by the governor. There are a whole host of out-of-our-control circumstances that may necessitate the kind of thing that we haven't been able to plan for here and that aren't normal practice. But then again, elections have been changing throughout the entire history of our republic, and so we can't answer that one definitively either.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, that said, I'm not confident in, with all due respect to those who were leading there at the legislature, I'm not confident in the leadership and the wishes of those at the legislature to solve this problem for us. I'm just not confident there. And if we move forward with this, and if we hand over this election to the county to handle, and the question still isn't answered, how independent voters may be treated the same as anyone else. Today, I will tell you, in the city of Phoenix, Today, I will tell you in odd number years in the city of Phoenix, whether the election is in August or November, they automatically get a ballot if they are signed up for the permanent early voting list. That's called access. And there's a bill running. Why don't we find out to see if that thing even passes? You know, again, we're taking action based on wishes of those at the legislature. The woulda, it might happen. So why don't we just go ahead and do this anyway? It's bad policy. And so I have to adamantly oppose this. I'm voting no. I'm going to stand up for the independent voter. I will stand up for every voter in the city of Phoenix. I'm standing up for the independent voter here.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman Stark, please.
Mayor, why that could be a problem, I think ordinarily the independents would get a ballot. I live in Paradise Valley Unified School District. We had an election this year and we got a ballot from the county. Didn't matter whether we were Republican, Independent, Libertarian, Democrat, we all got a ballot. So I'm guessing the majority of time it's not going to be a problem, but if it's going to be a problem, let's look at it and we can address it. But I feel pretty confident that we can work with the county to resolve that.
There's a request for a call for the question.
I'll second that.
There's a second on that.
Just hope the recorders is confident.
Mayor, there's a call for the question. I ask.
Roll call now. Okay. All in favor on the call for the question, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye. No.
Okay, so the ayes have it, so now the question has been called on my attempt to interpret the motion as made by Councilwoman Stark. So that's the motion that is on the table for a vote right now. No more debate. Roll call.
DeCiccio?
Yes.
Gallego?
Yes.
Noakowski?
Yes.
Stark? Yes. Valenzuela?
No.
Waring?
Vote yes to move it forward and see what comes back.
Yes. Sorry. Anxious.
Williams? Pastor?
I'm not comfortable with this, so no.
And Mayor Stanton?
Yes, so the motion passes 7-2, and we'll see you when you get the information that we need. Is that it? Is there a motion on 52 is the next item?
Move item 52. We're on 53. Oh.
We just did 53. We missed.
52. Okay.
We skipped 52. That was my mistake, so now we have to do 52. Is there a motion on 52?
I moved. Councilman Williams seconded.
And I seconded.
There's a motion. There's a second. Any cards on that item? Any comments or questions? Roll call.
DeCiccio? Gallego?
Yes.
Noakowski?
We're voting on the Board of Regents,
52.
right? 52. Yes.
Stark? Yes. Valenzuela?
Yes.
Waring? Williams?
Yes.
Pastor?
Yes.
Mayor Stanton?
Yes. Next item is 65. Is there a motion on 65?
65.
There's a second? Motion and a second. Mr. Leonard Clerk.
Oh, God.
Are we on 65?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just concerned because, recently, the last 20 or 30 years, cops, community-oriented policing, Mayor Giuliani, all these different programs they have for such, so-called high-crime neighborhoods. I realize some of my neighbors like when you crack down, and on this measure here, on the drug trafficking areas, I'm just concerned because when the Motel 6 issue came up with ICE, okay, I believe that you were following certain templates around this city that we deem as high crime areas, but the problem is, one of the police spokesmen on KJZZ was, the reporter from the Phoenix New-Times said that he had spoke with a Phoenix police spokesman that said that they do on an ad hoc basis utilize the motel lists to look for felons. Now, what I'm concerned about is this money that we're getting from the federal government, and I guess I'm a progressive because I like Social Security and all these things, but I guess I'm a libertarian when it comes to our civil rights. I'm concerned that by accepting this money on the drug trafficking, it sounds like, oh yeah, no-brainer, everything, but the details, I don't know about the details here because I'm just worried that this money bill will be used to crack down on certain neighborhoods because they're poor or minority neighborhoods. You know, I'm just uncomfortable with it. That's why I put neutral, and I will just continue to explore these high crime areas and what you're doing in them, because I haven't heard any of you speak up yet about Motel 6 working with ICE in your own city to separate our families. So this, I'm wondering if this will do the same. Is this about the police getting extra money to be working in certain neighborhoods to discriminate and get lists without the people, the clients, and Motel 6 or whatever knowing what's going on? So thank you.
All right, thank you very much for raising those concerns. There's a motion, there is a second. Any comments by council? Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Nowakowski.
Yes.
Stark. Valenzuela. Waring. Williams.
Yes.
Pastor. Mayor Stanton.
Yes, passes unanimously. 73 and 74 we can do together.
Move items 73 and 74.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any cards? All right, so the motion is in favor of 73 and 74. Patricia Trites, are you still here? Did you want to provide testimony at this time?
Yes,
Okay, and then, oh, you're on both. Okay, good. All right,
great,
one speaker. Good to see you.
great,
You can give testimony on both items at this time, please.
perfect, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, thank you, council people. My name is Patty Trites. I reside in the South Mountain area, specifically in the Southern Hills subdivision. My home was flooded twice in 2014. There were a total of 14 homes flooded in my subdivision, most of them less than 2 years old. In 2016, we had water overtop our sidewalks and our curbing. In 27, August 13th last year, we had 1 home flood and 2 garages flood. Each rain event becomes a major impact in our community and also to our neighbors in the South Mountain area. These are small rain events in 2016 and 2017. They were not even on the news. We can't afford this to continue. Our homeowners worry at each and every rain event. I currently serve as the HOA president of Southern Hills. I ask for the approval of number 73 and number 74. We are a gated community and represent over $700,000 in real estate taxes annually. But Southern Hills is on higher ground. The water that comes to us goes then downstream to our neighbors, all the way to Baseline and 27th. Time is of the essence for the Southern Hills community in South Mountain. Please approve number 73 and 74. You've got the details in front of you. I also ask for continued flood control funding for the South Mountain area. There's much building going on, there's expansion, you guys discussed it earlier. The area is booming and changing. Homeowners should not be afraid of each and every rain event. Thank you.
Mayor?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Patty, for your leadership. And one of the few good things that came out of this is we have a great cadre of community leaders who have gotten involved and incredibly educated. They keep trying to hire Patty at the Flood Control District. She knows so much about these issues. The really serious flooding events happened during my first year on the council, and I want to thank our city manager for taking this incredibly seriously, and for Ray Dovalina and his team. Our city manager appointed a cross-city team led by our deputy city manager. Thank you to Mario for his leadership, and that's everything from emergency management to the streets department to government affairs, meeting regularly to make sure that we learn all of the lessons and do what we can to prevent this from happening. Flood control is dramatically underfunded. It was, I think, partially a casualty of the recession where the county wanted to keep taxing levels where they were, and as public safety dramatically expanded, flood control was the big loser. That needs to change for safety reasons, for economic development reasons. There are great projects that would go forward if we only invested in this smart infrastructure. Today we have 2 votes, and they're related to a major flood control basin vote that we voted on with the city manager's leadership and expedited. The city did a unique partnership with Maricopa County Flood Control, where we paid for it. They didn't have the money in their budget, and now we got to they get paid us back. So very innovative to try to do what we can to keep people safe. And that first basin now needs infrastructure all around it to get that water there. So these are two very important votes today for keeping communities safe. It is not the end of it, though. We have a lot more work, and I hope that the Board of Supervisors will invest in more funding for flood control. I want to thank my supervisor, Steve Gallardo, for being a great partner. He gets it, and Ray, your team has been great. Please thank Hassan and the whole team. We have a lot more work to do, and we have another flood control meeting coming up soon, so we are not done, but today we ought to celebrate important movement forward. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, thank you. I really want to give a lot of credit to my colleague, Kate Gallegos, that really took this on. It was her first year. It was the 100-year flood, and basically she didn't stop. She went from the federal government to the state government to the county government, and then she came knocking on our doors saying something needs to be done. We need these retention areas. We need to help these individuals. It was one flood after another, and it was just sad. I share the Levine area with the council member, and I know how hard she's worked with this. I really want to congratulate her for all her hard work, and it's really shows with all this efforts, and now that we're creating this partnership with the city and the county, and now we have our staff working on it also. So thank you, Kate, for everything you've done.
Councilwoman Stark?
Yeah, I thank you. First off, thanks for being so patient through all of our discussions to sit here to testify on this. But I do commend Councilwoman Gallego on this issue, and she is correct about flood control. That we do pay a tax to the district, and they suffered during the recession. But what they do is really important, and not all their projects are always in Phoenix, but the projects they do still impact Phoenix, even if it's in another city. And so I'm glad you put a plug in for the flood control district. I know you have a great relationship with them, Ray, and I think we need to continue to have that relationship so we don't have the problems like you went through.
I would like to thank Councilwoman Gallego on this piece of moving of the beginning of 27th Avenue. However, 27th Avenue is still a major issue. We built a park there, and we built a large basin, and the way we built the park affects the homes. And I feel like we have some responsibility in the city for the way we develop that. Councilwoman Gallego has been working with all her constituents. Her constituents also contact me, so I understand the 27th Avenue flooding deeply. And there are a number of homes that were flooded not only twice, but 3 times. And so there's still issues happening there, and I believe that we have to continue on with, I would consider the fight to make sure that in the future not one home is flooded, and that we have put in the retention bases that are needed beforehand and not afterwards. But that's what happens when we get elected after the fact. But we're trying to do the best that we can with the resources, and working collectively with the Flood Control District to provide the fair share that's needed in that area. So, ready for a vote? Motion, everything? Roll call.
Cicio.
Gone.
Gallego.
Yes.
Nowakowski.
Yes.
Stark. Valenzuela. Waring. Williams. Pastor.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
7-0. Meeting adjourned.